tonight, so we'll start with that. Start right here. Well, it's hard to believe, but we're already into November, and we got Thanksgiving coming up, and we got an important day coming up after Thanksgiving. So this is Small Business Saturday Proclamation. Whereas the City of Ames celebrates our local businesses and the contribution they make to our local economy and community, and whereas 90% of consumers in the United States say Small Business Saturday has had a positive impact on their community, and whereas the City of Ames supports our local small businesses that create jobs, boost our economy, and preserve our neighborhoods, and whereas consumers in the City of Ames agree it's important to support the small businesses they value in our community, and whereas advocacy groups and public and private organizations in the state of Iowa and across the country have endorsed the Saturday after Thanksgiving as Small Business Saturday, therefore, I, John A. Hala, Mayor of the City of Ames, do hereby proclaim Saturday, November 24th, 2018, as Small Business Saturday in Ames, and ask that residents of our community support our local small businesses and merchants on that day and throughout the year with their patronage. Cindy, you want to make a few comments?
I would like to make a couple of comments. Thank you. I'm Cindy Hicks, 304 Main Street. First of all, I'd like to thank Mayor Hala and the Ames City Council for this wonderful proclamation. We have 201 small businesses in our downtown district. Those 201 businesses employ 2,436 full and part-time employees. When you shop at a small business, you are supporting your neighbors, your friends, the people you go to church with, not someone in an office in a big city somewhere, but the people that you know and love. And by supporting them, you're also supporting the people that they employ and doing great things for our community. And so I would like to thank you for recognizing Small Business Saturday and invite everybody to shop downtown on that day. Thanks.
And the second important one is one that we need to focus on. Hey, wow. Good turnout. I'll let you introduce them after I read it. How's that sound? All right. So we have a National Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week, which is actually this week. Whereas for the past 26 years, the National Coalition for Homeless and the National Student Campaign Against Hunger and Homelessness have sponsored National Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week. And whereas the purpose of the proclamation is to educate the public about the many reasons why people are hungry and homeless, including the shortage of affordable housing in Ames, Story County for very low-income residents, and to encourage support for homeless assistance service providers, as well as community service opportunities for students and the school service organizations. And whereas there are many organizations committing to sheltering and providing supportive services, as well as meals and food supplies to the homeless, which include Assault Care Center extending shelter and support access, Ames Community School District, Emergency Residence Project, Food at First, Good Neighbor, Mid-Iowa Community Action Agency, Story County Community Services, the Hunger Collaboration, the Salvation Army, Veterans Affairs, and Youth and Shelter Services. Whereas the focus of National Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week 2018 is Resolve to Fight Poverty, and whereas the City of Ames recognizes that hunger and homelessness continues to be a serious problem for many individuals and families in Ames and Story County. And where the intent of the National Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week is consistent with the commitment and dedication of the members of the Two Rivers Committee, the homelessness prevention team, to educate the community and to provide the needed services and support to citizens who suffer from hunger and or homelessness. Therefore, I, John A. Hala, Mayor of the City of Ames, Iowa, do hereby proclaim November 10th through 18th, 2018 as National Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week. On behalf of our community, I encourage all citizens to recognize that many people do not have housing and need support from citizens and private, public, nonprofit service entities. I believe, Vanessa, do you have a few words to make and you want to introduce our esteemed guests.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for always recognizing and supporting us during Hunger and Homeless Awareness Week. And behind me, I have a few of the representatives that the mayor called out that provide on-the-ground boots for services for our hunger and homelessness in our community and in Story County. So I have United Way, I think you recognize Jean, and I have Cassandra from the Access, and I have Troy from Emergency Resident Project, and Carrie from the Salvation Army. And I didn't even look. Great. I want to just take a few minutes, if you don't mind, just to talk about this collaboration that has recently started between the Emergency Residence Project, the Salvation Army, Good Neighbors, Story County Community Services, and the City of Ames. And we call ourselves the Homeless Prevention Team. And we have been researching and trying to develop a coordinated entry process for homeless prevention for rent and utilities in our community. One of the things that we see our customers do is having to go from place to place to place before they can get services. And we're hoping to coordinate this with the asset and with support of United Way to collaborate that way they can go to one spot and get the information and services they need for many agencies in our community. We find that it's exhausting for them and it's exhausting for us. And that's one of the things that this collaboration is doing in the fight for Hunger and Homeless Awareness Week. So we, again, want to thank you for it. This past September, we had our first Lunch and Learn to talk about this collaboration with other human service agencies and with faith-based organizations. And just to give you a little feedback, these agencies that I just mentioned, we have provided over $700,000 towards rent and utilities this past 17-18 fiscal year, assisting over 2,400 households. So you can see this is an important initiative that we would like to continue and we'd like to make it better. And again, we couldn't do it without your support, and I'll offer any comments from the rest of the team.
Okay, next item is consent agenda. Does council wish to pull anything from the consent agenda? Seeing none, entertain a motion to approve.
Move consent.
Second.
All right, roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Okay, next item is public forum, and we'll open public forum, and anyone who would like to comment on something which is not on the agenda, you're invited to come and offer your comments to the city council. And Gary, you want to talk about?
Thank you for entertaining us this evening. I know there will be some parking discussion coming up shortly in the agenda, but I want to cover something slightly different than that. I want to read a prepared statement that I have.
Gary, could you give your address?
I'm
Yes.
sorry, yeah.
My business address is 220 Main Street. That's Ames Silversmithing, downtown Ames. Home address is 3101 Ridgetop Road here in Ames. 42 years ago, as a wet behind the ears and incredibly experienced 20-year-old businessman, I opened Ames Silversmithing with my soon-to-be wife, Karen. With a lot of hard work, some great employees, and a customer base that liked what we offered, Ames Silversmithing is now one of the true anchors in downtown Ames. In those 42 years, I've seen a lot of things that have impacted downtown, both positively and negatively. Without going into detail, I can say with certainty that the rate increase on the parking meters has generated more negativity from my customers than any other event in my business life. Sure, there's always been a few that grumbled about feeding the meters, but I've seen nothing like the outcry we've experienced over the last few months since the meter rates were increased. The warmth and appeal and the desire to stroll up and down Main Street is gone and has been replaced with a rush in, rush out, don't want to get a damn ticket mentality. Customers used to throw a couple quarters in the meter and be able to stroll and shop. They'd stop at Mormon's, then my store, then perhaps Chocolatery Stom, where they'd sit and enjoy a gelato knowing they had time in the meter. That feeling is now gone and replaced with grumblings about not coming downtown to shop anymore. I never graduated from college, so business theory is lost on me. But I know this, my goal in business is to ensure my customers have a rewarding experience in not only my store downtown, but other stores in downtown Ames as well. I know I share this passion with many other business owners, and it should be the principal tenet of all business classes. This thought has served me well, but the decisions by this council are making this difficult to accomplish. The reality at this moment is the rate increases cost people to reconsider whether or not they will come downtown to shop. In fact, I've heard stories from many business owners detailing customers' comments to that end. I believe staff in their efforts to generate more funds simply did not anticipate the outcry from the public, the reduction in traffic in downtown stores, and a reduction in revenue for not only business downtown, but the city itself. This has been a classic case of the law of unintended consequences. In closing, by following staff's recommendations, the city council got it wrong. No one likes to admit they're wrong, but the council is supposed to represent the citizens of Ames, and the citizens are overwhelmingly telling you, you got this wrong, please make it right before it's too late. And after that, I would reference what I sent to you earlier about the poll that WITV did recently, asking if people felt the meter rates should be reduced. And 76% of the respondents said yes, in the affirmative. This is the citizens of Ames speaking to all of you, and they're taking it out on the downtown business owners by not, or at least considering not coming downtown. I was at the Hy-Vee meat market the other day buying some ground beef. The guy behind the counter recognized me. He said, "How's that parking thing coming downtown?" Before I had a second to answer, a lady interjected, "I will never come downtown because of the meter rate." And unfortunately, it's hurting our business owners. I thank you for your time tonight. There are other sentiments. I don't want to take up more time. Mike Peterson had similar sentiments that wanted me to read, but it's basically covered in what I had there.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate it.
Pat Breen, 547 Main Street. Aunt Maud's Restaurant is my business. I agree 100% with what Gary has just said. I don't need to take more of your time, but it's true. It is affecting our visits, the parking meter rates. So we're asking you to please reconsider. If a mistake has been made, it can be corrected. Please reconsider the rate. What Gary did not say is we're asking for a rate of 50 cents an hour, as opposed to it used to be 25 cents for an hour and 15 minutes. Does need to be reduced from what it got moved to, please. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Pat.
Hello, I'm Sarah Sponheimer. I work at the Frame Shop at 210 Main Street. I'm also here to talk about the parking in general because we're still getting a lot of complaints. And some of what has come to light in terms of interactions with customers and people downtown is that it's very out of keeping and out of step with what people would expect from Ames. And so I was thinking to ask you all first, seeing the community vision statement on the wall, what is a vision statement for? Is that vision statement to be respected? Because the second paragraph of the vision statement says, and the city website says, the Ames is for those who want the charms and convenience of a small town with the opportunities and amenities that come from a major university. And there were far fewer complaints about parking downtown before January. And the only changes since then have been that the city stepped up enforcement. They were ticketing a lot more frequently. And then the meter rate was quintupled in July. And these actions are not in keeping with that small town charm and convenience. And they seem out of touch from what we're hearing from the people with what the local people would expect. And I assume a lot of them are your people you're representing here. So I'm wondering why the council hasn't become aware of such things before it would institute such policies, considering the amount of outcry we're seeing. There was a lot of enjoyment of downtown before, and I think that without these parameters put on time and money and people thinking so much about them, it was a lot more like the Ames way of doing things. So I did write to Gloria Betcher, and I believe she shared with all of you some ideas that we have, and they are in keeping with what Gary has recommended in the past and what Pat just suggested now. And we suggest that two approaches, both raising the meter rate to 50 cents an hour, which is a 250% increase from what it was, but we think would still be acceptable to customers, and lowering enforcement and administrative costs by making some of the changes recommended by Cindy Hicks, where the 4-hour side of the CBD lot is changed to 10-hour or even unlimited during parking hours, would result in there being more funds for the desired improvements for downtown. And there would be more than there was before these changes. So we think you'd still see what you want, but yet it would be acceptable to the people of Ames and in line with the vision. There have been attempts to shift the onus of proof to those advocating a compromise such as this, something more in keeping with the city's vision, while no proof seems to have been gathered or provided for any of the ideas already implemented that these would be accepted or positive in Ames. And we can prove from our books and the general perception from downtown that both were much better prior to the city's changes that are contrary to this vision statement. So we do ask the council to change parking regulations to better accommodate downtown visitors and employees, lower the meter rate to 50 cents an hour as suggested by downtown business people, and implement Cindy Hicks's suggestion for more long-term parking for employees. As for other parking system ideas, such as hang tags and payment kiosks, these are unnecessary complications and recall less friendly cities rather than an Ames that is for those who want those charms and convenience of small town. Simplicity is best, not just as relates to the Ames vision, but also for resources required for enforcement and administration. And those costs were about half of the budget needed for the parking system, as I recall from that October meeting that I attended. So I encourage you and the rest of the council to keep Ames' vision in mind. And were those comments received from Susan Owen? She sent a PDF, I believe, with many hundreds of customer comments and downtown business people and downtown enjoyment people, their comments. We didn't receive any kind of response back that we know of. She had said she received nothing, but they were received. Okay, because I'm prepared to read some of those comments if you all didn't see those. Because it was repeated over and over again that it's too expensive, that it's too much of an increase, that it discourages spending time downtown. You know, what a way to support downtown. Yeah, superlatives like ridiculous, and that the general public is as strapped as the governments are, and that you can't make up for it that way. So good to know that you got it. I saw some nods. And thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to talk about the parking meter before we change?
Daniel Forster, 225 Main Street, second floor, Easting Plot Studio. I guess we're kind of beating a dead horse here, but I kind of wanted to add a little bit more nuance to the thing. The reality is I don't think anybody really thinks that $1 an hour is really that much money. It's not like a really huge economic or financial burden for any of us. We can all afford to pay $1 an hour to park somewhere. But perception 100% drives the way that people spend money. And it doesn't have to be too much money in reality for people's fears or perceptions of it as being honestly expensive to affect the way people shop. Obviously, people are going to complain about things. Eventually, people will probably start spending money downtown again, no matter what you guys do with the parking. I actually am of the radical opinion that we should do away with all meters. I've lived in a few very vibrant cities that managed to have public parking with no meters. My favorite example is Mountain View, California. It's unfair. Castro Street, Mountain View, California is the home of Google. So obviously, like, they have a little bit more leverage to play around with, like, kind of extreme ideas like not charging people for parking. But I can tell you that even as expensive as rents are on Castro Street, the main drag of Mountain View, any business that went out of business for some reason, there was somebody in that spot within a month. Even on a Tuesday night, I would walk around Castro Street and it would be thronged with people that were spending lots and lots of money. And this is California money. So like people are spending like 4 times as much as people spend on the equivalent Main Street here in Ames. I mean, the message that I'm given is that City Council would rather people to spend money on Duff, which obviously Duff is a viable economic, thoroughfare. They also deserve to have people spending money at those businesses. But, once again, as Sarah said, like part of what people like about Ames is that it feels like a small town while not being a small town. And that's kind of what makes Main Street Ames as being so necessary. But since our meeting, I've had some of these conversations with my staff, and right now I only have 2 people working under me. We're tattoo artists. I don't know how much you guys know about tattooing, but usually it's not something that you can finish in an hour, depending on what it is. Especially my shop, we focus on bigger work. Since our last meeting, I've had at least 3 or 4 different days where my staff had to park at a meter because the 4-hour lot was full, because nobody was parking in the meter. So Main Street's empty, but the free lot's totally full. Someone pointed out that the lot over next to Wells Fargo, there's usually some spots there, even when it's pretty packed everywhere else. But I can't tell my guys, park all the way over there, and then in 4 hours, go and move your car so you don't get a ticket, because it's a bigger ticket than just the regular meter ticket, I assume. Like I said, I don't have a car, so I don't actually have to deal with any of these problems, but I also have a business on Main Street, so my clients have to deal with it. My staff has to deal with it. And it's just, once again, it's not whether or not it's actually too expensive. Like, the perception of it being too expensive means that it's too expensive. And I think like the easy comeback of like, well, we moved it from $0.25 to $1, big whoop. I mean, it is a big deal. Just because people believe it's a big deal, that means it's absolutely a big deal. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? No, Cindy, you want to talk, but since we're on this topic. Yep. Okay, Cindy.
Cindy Hicks, 304 Main Street. I just wanted to come and talk to you guys for a few minutes about the Main Street program. The Ames City Council has always been very supportive of the Main Street program. And as we end the year of 2018, I just wanted to share with you a few of our accomplishments over this year. These are accomplishments that are made possible by the investment the city makes every year in the Main Street program. So in 2018, our district was listed on the National Register of Historic Places, opening up valuable state and federal tax credits to property owners. Those tax credits are already being taken advantage of by some property owners, I'm happy to say. We completed an extensive market analysis in partnership with Main Street, Iowa, which provided a lot of valuable data that you may recall I shared with you very early in the year. Volunteers performed downtown beautification, including spring planting, district cleanup days, and bench maintenance. We actually have a new bench being painted as we speak, and it will soon be in place at the Hy-Vee drugstore, actually being painted by the gentleman that spoke just before me. We received national media coverage by harvesting 200 pounds of sweet potatoes from downtown planters. The AP picked that up, and it was printed in papers all across the country. We donated in all 300 pounds of vegetables, including those sweet potatoes, to Food at First to help folks in our community who have food insecurity. Many downtown residents also supplemented their groceries with the vegetables they picked on Main Street. We received a $75,000 challenge grant just last week for the development of a downtown building. That's the 6th challenge grant in 7 years for a total of $403,000 that has come to our community through the Main Street program. We were recognized by the state in March for achieving the $10 million mark in private investment in our downtown. Ames Main Street achieved national accreditation for the 9th straight year. And I just finished the accreditation paperwork today, and we qualify for the 10th year in 2019. We worked with Main Street, Iowa to rebrand the district and program, which has and will continue in the future to help us better tell our story and market our downtown. Community happens here, by the way. We have purchased new light pole banners for throughout the district. They're not all up yet. They are on Main Street, but we're having to alter some of them to fit poles on non-standard sizes. So those should be installed by the end of the year. Ames Main Street hosted the Smithsonian Institute Traveling Exhibit Hometown Teams in partnership with the Ames Public Library, Ames Historical Society, Octagon Center for the Arts, and Iowa State Design on Main. We coordinated 2,000 hours of volunteer time in 2018 for a program lifetime total of 37,000 hours times $21 and some cents an hour that a volunteer hour is valued at in Iowa. That's quite a bit of free labor downtown. Main Street organized events, not including a farmer's market, that's not our event, that attracted an estimated 30,000 visitors to downtown in 2018. You may recall we had around 15,000 on July 24th for RAGBRAI. As the largest investor in the Ames Main Street program, I hope that the City Council sees the value in the investment the city makes in the heart of our Ames community. Our proposed 2019 events, you'll see on the brochure I gave you, proposed because we haven't sent in our event application yet, so don't share those dates. A list of our 2019 board members. These are dedicated people from all over the community who love downtown and are ready to work to keep it alive and vibrant. So with that, I would just like to thank you for your time and the work you do for our great city.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to address council under public forum? Excuse me. Seeing as there is none, we'll close public forum. I always make a comment to Gary and Pat, and Sarah and Daniel. Appreciate your comments. As you're aware, under public forum, we can't respond back to or have a dialogue. But there is an item on the agenda for parking. And in addition, we have council comments at the end of the meeting. So if there's additional action or direction on that point in time, it'll come under those two topics then. Okay, moving on to item 19. Resolution approving rental registration for 611 Lynn, allowing the property to be eligible as a rental property under the property cap exception. Council, do you have any questions for staff on this topic?
No.
Nope.
Okay. I entertain a motion then.
Move alternative one.
Second.
And just for people maybe watching on TV, would you just,
I would move that we approve the rental registration for 611 Lynn so that it may be eligible as a rental property under the cap exception.
okay. Discussion? Roll call? Aye.
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 Motion carried. Item 20, staff report update on downtown parking items. So you have John and Damien.
So this report is to follow up to the report and discussion we had last month. So as you see in the report, there are 3 items of follow-up. The first one is regarding the downtown parking study and what the scope might be in moving forward with that. So the tasks are shown in the report. Tasks 1 through 7 would be all-inclusive, all-encompassing report. What we're proposing from what we heard from the previous council meeting was sort of a mid-range report that would include tasks 1, 2, 5, and 7. So that is a parking supply and demand study and parking alternatives analysis, both looking at the existing and future parking conditions and needs. And then, of course, extensive outreach and stakeholder meetings throughout the development of the study, and then creation of a report with recommendations. So the scope of that level of study would be about $70,000. And I think we were looking at, about 9 months to complete that?
Yeah, that's our best estimate for that. And one thing I would also point out is that all the other tasks that weren't highlighted in bold would also be asked, but they would be looked at as a phased. So if after this core, the essentially minimum scope of services is what we're proposing, if we wanted to add on to that after those minimum scope is done, it would be an alternative that could be added to the contract. But the core is, yes, as John was saying, 6 to 9 months we expect to complete.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
Is it included under the scope of the bolded items to consider the impact of things like rideshare, scooters, and bikes?
If that was, that'd be something that we talk to the consultant that they could. I think any parking consultant, we'd have to specifically ask them to look at those sort of things. But I would say just from past experience on doing RFPs, I mean, we would be selecting a consultant based upon their national experience, their essentially similar studies. So things were rideshare, I would expect the parking consultant to consider those. Any good professional would consider things that are current.
So it sounds like we wouldn't need that direction tonight, probably.
No, I wouldn't say. I would say as an RFP, it is good to, again, to say what is our goals, and then let the professionals come back with essentially ideas and scope, like as far as like specific things that they think would meet our goals and our needs.
Okay.
Other questions? Damien, what would be the deliverable? What would be the tangible thing that we would receive, or council would receive, the public would receive, that could be used moving forward?
So in summary, I'll kind of try and keep it short, but essentially what they would do is they would provide us a summary of the data collection that they did. They would provide us their analysis, their professional opinion, how we compare, how our city, based upon what we want to accomplish, how we would compare it to other cities who have done similar things or wanted to accomplish similar things in downtown areas related to parking. So we'd have data, we'd have ideas and analysis, maybe methods that we could employ. And then they probably, depending on how specific we want to get in the development of alternatives, we're probably going to see probably a short list of projects, essentially things that we could implement, whether they might be like a policy project, they might be actual infrastructure or some kind of physical thing that would be built and costs associated with it.
And would there be budgets associated with those as well, too?
It would be essentially, yeah, they'd probably give us
ballpark ranges or whatever?
Yeah, very high level numbers.
Mm-hmm. And then I'm assuming that it would also take into account some of the things that are being talked about on Lincoln Way, and also tie in with what's envisioned for Lincoln Way corridor study, that would be woven into it to say if this goes or this goes.
And we talked with planning about coordination with the comp plan or any of the corridor plans, and planning would be involved with this consultant throughout the entire process. So if they needed specific guidance for coordination purposes, they would be involved.
Okay. John, procedurally, are you wanting us to take action item by item, or to wait till we go through all three?
I think they're disparate enough that we could take it item by item.
Okay. Do you want any public input, or are you ready for a motion?
Oh, that's a good point. Let's go through all three, then we'll have public input. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, the next direction was regarding employee parking in the downtown area. So the central business district parking lot lies south of the Main Street businesses between there and the railroad tracks. In general, those spaces include 4-hour time limit, a 2-hour time limit, and then the 24-hour reserve spots. So kind of to characterize council's feelings from the previous meeting was that the study that was just discussed, maybe let that carry out before we make any recommendations or you give any direction on more of a permanent way of handling employee parking, but for us to come back with, in essence, interim options while the study's being carried out on how we could better address the concerns that they're bringing up regarding employee parking. So both the options that we show in the staff report involve an employee hang tag system. So the first option would include a $20 per month fee. So we've kind of looked at that from a couple different ways. Damien did a time value analysis of an employee parking in those spots during typical business hours as compared to a 24-hour reserve. And that calculation showed that had a value of about $18. Also, just the spaces being of value and then giving those priorities to employees to park there all day without moving could come with some value. So that's why we had the $20 recommendation in the report. If council didn't want to have an ongoing monthly fee associated with that, we'd still go with the employee hang tag system in option 2. But we could either have just a one-time nominal fee to cover the capital costs of the hang tag system, or council could choose to make that cost-free as well. The parking tags then would be used in the 4-hour stalls. So employees that did have these hang tags would then be able to park in those 4-hour stalls for an unlimited period of time. They would not have to come out and move their cars during the day in those 4-hour stalls.
Questions?
Do we have any means of determining who has a tag and who doesn't, or whether someone is still an employee after a few months after having gotten a tag?
Well, typically the way we would handle it would be very similar to the reserve space where they'd have to come in, fill out. It's a very simple one-page form, essentially sign up for the tag. What we would do is, working with our parking enforcement, is that we would let them know these are the current numbered, because every hang tag has like a unique number similar to, I think, how Iowa State or other employee hang tag systems would be. So it's essentially up to the enforcement people that if a tag has expired, they would know it by looking it up in the database. So we would hope somebody would return the number so we could reuse it, but if not, then it just no longer becomes a valid tag.
So I think the numbers, we did a survey, and I think the numbers were about 2/3 of the reserved were employees.
That's right. Yep.
And about 1/3 were residents. So that'd be another concern of a completely free hang tag system, is what the revenue impact might be then from employees releasing those $50 spots in favor of a hang tag. We just don't know what the impact of that might be.
So I'm still not really sure how we monitor whether someone is still an employee. So if I have a job downtown for a couple of months, let's say I'm employed down there over the summer before going back to school, do we have a means of knowing that the person is no longer employed downtown, or can they continue to pay their $20 for an employee hang tag even if they aren't employed?
Well, we do it month by month. So I think we would require some type of verification each month that they received a hang tag that they.
Correct. And we wouldn't, I mean, again, like what John was talking about, we don't foresee this as being a permanent solution. We're really hoping that that we would only maybe need to do this for essentially 1 year worth of time before we'd have a parking study that would look at the overall parking of downtown, maybe even the policy impacts of how we charge for certain things. So even though it might sound a little onerous at the beginning, this parking hang tag system is something that we're hoping to get up and running right away to meet that goal that we talked about at the last council meeting. So it's not necessarily a perfect solution, but it'd be something that would keep people from getting tickets.
And the
And-
expectation would be that it's not tied to a license plate number. This could be a tag that could be shared by a business with multiple employees.
Of all the pros and cons, maybe one of the benefits of a hang tag system is that you can just put it in whatever car you want.
So one of my concerns is that we're selling hang tags for the 4-hour spaces, but we're also hearing that, at least in some cases, as Mr. Forrester reported, his employees are finding it's already difficult to park in the 4-hour spaces. So these things are sort of like what we call hunting permits on campus, where you're buying the chance to park all day, but you're also taking the chance that you will not find a space in which you can park all day, right?
Yeah, so the $50 reserve would still be an option, and then that spot would be yours 24 hours a day. A lot of and I certainly understand the concern with employees that have different time schedules or maybe part-time. I think the majority of the full-time employees would be arriving at the Main Street area before the customer rush might arrive. So I think they'd have a better chance of finding the stalls before the customers came downtown.
Other questions? The reason that these two options came out of council direction, correct?
Right.
And if memory serves me right, council didn't talk about the 9 to 10 hour option. Is that right? Or is that still under consideration? In other words, it was Sarah made the comment, in public forum about, just having 7 or 9 to 10 hours. I know it may be challenging for enforcement, but can you kind of talk to that a little bit, John?
Yeah, so again, the 10-hour is in essence an all-day unlimited time permit.
With no hang tags required, right?
No hang tags.
Okay.
And that'd be, again, because of the enforcement issue. The police don't have enforcement for a 10-hour window. So that's why if it were to be a 10-hour parking, in essence, because it would not have the ability to be enforced, would in essence become an all-day unlimited parking allowance.
Yeah, we did talk about that during the workshop session.
And eliminated it.
Mhm.
I think it's important to close the loop because it was brought up in public forum. So, Okay. Any other questions on this topic? On this item before I go into parking meters?
Let me just make a comment here. I think that we'll have more discussion about this later, more substantially, because I think we might kind of architect this one. But I wonder if instead of ending up with staff direction on what we'd like to see here, we come up with a proposal and then redirect it to a group from Main Street, like maybe the parking task force we've heard of, to give them a specific proposal and get some specific feedback on that proposal before we move forward from it. So it's just a possibility I want to suggest to council to see whether we go that way, and it might affect how, our discussion and what people are thinking when they're talking to us.
I'm sorry, could you explain that again, David? I don't understand.
Yeah, the idea is instead of ending up with specific staff direction on writing an ordinance or whatever it is, we end up with a specific description of what we want to do, and we give it to the parking task force for their comments before we receive their comments and then act on it.
I think one of the goals is we're trying to promote communication, and we're not saying, hey, this is what we're thinking about doing. What do you think? And change it all, but maybe they have some inputs in terms of tweaking as well too, to try and basically foster good two-way communication is what the intent is, versus just saying we're going to do this and staff comes back and then we have more negative feedback coming back because we didn't think through things as well too. I mean, it is important in the downtown area. You want to, as being many of us probably do park downtown a lot, and we use employee, a lot as well too. A lot of moving parts here, and we don't want to discourage and make it onerous. I mean, I understand you went through a process to get to the $20, per month. for some of us, that may not be much. For some others, it may be a lot of money as well too. So it's just, we want to just get it right so we can move forward together, working together with the group.
It would have some risks too. It would slow things down. And I think ultimately we would be making the final decisions. So it might be that people have to do some work and then we say, well, no, we want to do it the other way. That might be the outcome. But it could be a useful step along the way, something to think about.
Okay. Parking, third item on the computer, credit cards.
Yes, thank you. The third direction was to explore other options to make for the parking meters, other options of payment for the parking meters that may be more customer friendly. So Damien has looked into that, and I'll just kick it over to him to describe what he looked at.
Yeah, so really for the sake of time, we kept with our current vendor, POM. There's a multitude of vendors that supply credit card solutions. So for simplicity, we kept with the company that we had, and they have essentially what they call a smart parking meter that takes. The nice thing about their product is that it takes credit card, also takes smart card, and it still takes coin. Essentially just adds credit card payment to it. A couple of logistic issues that we'd have is we would have to come up with the same or a similar type of contract of how we handle the merchant fees, the transaction fees, similar to what we talked about and discussed with Park Mobile, how we would handle, and I think keeping in the same kind of policy, we would pass that on to the consumer at the time of purchase. One good thing about this product is that you can replace, one meter can replace 2 parking spaces. So when I looked at the cost of it, right now they're about $600 for a 2-space meter, and we have just under 600 spaces downtown. So, and there might be some unknowns that we encounter as far as locations of meters, posts, etc. So we're looking at around $200,000 to retrofit all of downtown. Either that, and essentially one of the things that would, if you wanted to move forward with that, would be whether we would want to phase it. That's a fairly large number that I don't really say right now that the parking fund couldn't support that and cover infrastructure. So we'd have to pick how we prioritize the revenue and how we spend it. Maybe one last thing I would add, we did also, the company offered this, but one of the complaints that we had, maybe it's not convenient to put money back on a smart card. So they do have these meters that have modems in them where you put in your credit card, say how much time you want to add to your smart card. And so maybe you can't buy a card out on the street, but you can recharge, you can put more time on the street and not have to come to City Hall or over at ISU parking to put money on your smart card. It just makes that more convenient.
Do they have a kiosk option like that would dispense a new smart card?
They do. There's what I believe they've referred to as a Luke station. So it's those large kind of monolithic kiosks. Difficulty there is they require power. They require specific internet connectivity. And usually, because they're, I think if I remember right, I have to get a current price, but if I remember right, they're around $25,000 to $30,000 per station. Which is great at the entrance and exit of a controlled facility. But when you start to look up and down a city block, like Main Street, for example, inevitably, if you put it on one side of the street, the other side of the street would be inconvenient to get to. So it could be, if you tried to put a kiosk on every side of every block, you start to essentially get to the same number or over the same number as if we just retrofitted all the meters with a credit card. It would probably be cheaper than trying to put those kiosk stations.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Okay. Anything else you want to share before we go to public comment?
No.
All right. Open public comment on this topic, and let's just take it in order. Anyone have any comments on the parking study?
Oh.
All right. All right. Okay, Gary, go ahead and introduce yourself again, please.
Gary Younger, 220 Main Ames.
Okay.
I'm actually reading a letter from Terry Stark, who owns Chocolate Stom, because he was unable to come to the meeting tonight because he's at Cinderella.
This is the letter that he emailed us already?
The one he sent us.
Yes, I wasn't aware he sent it to you. So
Mhm.
if you're
We
all,
did receive a
did.
letter from him.
Yeah.
okay, great.
Thank you. All right. Next item would be the employee parking. Cindy?
Cindy Hicks, 304 Main Street. Back in August, I sent a letter to City Council with a recommendation from Ames Main Street. We communicated with over 100 downtown business owners, and over 95% of them agreed. Now, that in itself is a feat. They agreed. But they wanted an extension of the 4-hour parking to 10-hour parking or unlimited parking. Not the complication of a hang tag, not an extra cost that would be passed on to either downtown employees or the business owners themselves, but an unlimited parking back there to make it a little bit easier on their lives. That was the recommendation we made. And that was through a consensus of our downtown business owners. And so I just wanted to throw that out there, that we are in support of that and that we did communicate with business owners heavily over it. So I would recommend that you please go back and look at that option. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else on this offered comments on the employee parking? And how about the use of parking meters to take credit cards? Anyone wish to offer any input?
Yeah,
Can you introduce yourself? Yeah.
My name's Kristen Roach. I'm owner of Little Woods Herbs and Tea located at 136 Main Street. While I feel credit cards to the parking meter is a wonderful idea because it would help add to that ambience of essentially you pay and forget about it, because as Daniel said, it's not the dollar amount that's the issue. It's the perception of, having to go plug the meter and being on a short leash for time. It does feel a little premature with the parking study happening. So I would just ask that you defer a decision on making such a large investment before you have a parking study completed. Can I also, I hesitated to stand up and I feel I missed the opportunity. Going back to the previous topic of employee parking, honestly, it's not so much that I'm for or against a hang tag versus a unlimited, but I would urge you to make a decision on this as it has come to you a couple times. We have, I feel, done our due diligence talking to the community that this is something that needs to happen sooner rather than later. It was supposed to be an interim solution to help alleviate a burden on employees who, most of which, I think there was over 2,000 employees downtown, and many of those are not working salary jobs, not working full-time, are part-time employees working for under $10 an hour. And it's a really big burden on them to be getting so many parking tickets. So I would urge you to act sooner rather than later. And then also just an FYI, due to differences of opinion on how to proceed in crafting a proposal to the City Council and next actions, Main Street Ames has stepped back from the task force, although we still completely support their work. We wanted to continue to focus on the parking study and are kind of facing some of our own internal workload that needs to be done that we have to unfortunately prioritize over working with the group of concerned citizens. That's it. Okay.
Anybody else?
Sarah Sponheimer, the Frame Shop, 210 Main Street again. I want to thank Mr. Martin for bringing up the idea of communicating about ideas moving forward. And I was just going to suggest that rather than getting too caught up in minutiae about the parking system ideas, perhaps it would be good to get your constituents' opinions, because again, what we're hearing is there's much more interest in a simple, inexpensive parking system, something you don't really have to think about. And that's the beauty of what we had before, is it was mostly timed, it was low cost, very affordable. And so don't spend too much of your time without talking with them first. That's my suggestion. So thank you.
Last call. Okay, we'll close public input. Council,
Parking study first.
let's go ahead, go in order.
Yeah. I mean, I think that one sounds good. I would get us a lot of the information I think we need. So I would move that we go ahead and pursue the parking study as described by staff.
Funding it the way that.
Yeah,
listed.
exactly. I was just going to look that up.
Okay, so just, I think it'd be helpful for Amy if we have a clear motion.
Sure.
Page
Okay.
2 of the
Yep.
stuff.
Thank you.
So it would be,
Okay, so I would move that we pursue this parking study and fund it with $45,731 coming from the general fund, $24,269 from unobligated road use tax.
okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Number 2, employee parking options. Parking options.
So can I ask council a question? In thinking about this issue, I'm wondering what having the hang tags is going to help. We have a limited number of 4-hour spaces. We will have hang tags, which give people the ability to park longer if there's a space available. But if we have people who are coming to work in the middle of the day and the spaces are all gone in the 4-hour slots, it doesn't help them. So there's still the possibility that they're going to end up getting tickets. So what is the problem we are solving? Are we solving the issue that people are getting lots of tickets because they're parking for a very long time because of their jobs? Or are we solving the problem of ensuring that we have revenue to pave parking lots and create enforcement positions and fund them? I don't see how having the hang tags fixes the problem of people getting tickets, which is a big concern to me. If people say, I have hundreds of dollars of tickets because I'm working downtown, that to me is a major issue. And I don't know that the hang tag solves that problem.
Well, I would say presumably some of the 4-hour that's currently occupied now all the time is staff, and they just have to go out and move every 4 hours. So with the hang tag system, I mean, I think that's probably a lot of who does occupy that 4-hour row. So the hang tag system may not be perfect, but it does mean that people don't have to go out and relocate their car and take the chance in relocating that they won't find a good spot or they get hung up at a meter or something. That's where I would see the benefit is that I think probably staff are using those 4-hour spots now. And they get the hang tag and they get there early in the day, they can leave their car there rather than move it halfway through the day, which is the benefit to them.
Well, but we're already hearing that there are not 4-hour spaces available all day for all the employees downtown, right? And we don't have a limited number of hang tags that we're going to sell, do we?
We could set a
You could set a limit.
But then that doesn't help us either.
But they can be shared
And
too, the hang tags.
I mean, I
as
think
well.
it depends on the choices you make on where to park as well. I mean, there are certainly other lots on Main Street that are not used that offer 4-hour parking or that could offer unlimited parking with a hang tag.
So I guess my other question is, if one of our goals in charging for the hang tags is to ensure that we get some revenue coming in, if we don't get that revenue coming in, for whatever reason, where does that put us? What money are we using to pave our parking lots?
Well, we'd have to use general fund money. We'd have to use potentially local option sales tax, maybe sell bonds. We wouldn't be able to use road use tax for anything that's off the right of way. So
Are you asking the way it's budgeted now?
Well, I'm asking, I was going to ask the way it's budgeted now, but I was also going to ask, what's the fail safe for, we charge, but we don't make enough
This is
money.
temporary anyway, though.
Right, but the issue of parking downtown is going to continue. Employee parking issues are going to continue. We will have a parking study done, but my experience with parking studies says that they don't necessarily solve anything. We've had them before, and we've
Well, I
still
don't know
got
why
problems.
we just voted to have one then if we're going into it thinking that it's not going to accomplish anything.
Well, I'm willing to try it again, Amber, but in the past, our parking studies haven't really solved our problems. So I'm going to remain guardedly
Because
optimistic.
no
but-
decisions were made as a result of what was recommended. I mean, we're partly in this situation because no council raised parking meter rates for 20 years.
True.
So.
Yeah.
True.
It is a good question though in general, and something we should think about is if we do have funding that falls short or, for parking lot renovations and things like that, we're either looking at sales tax dollars that we have plenty of other uses for as well, or property tax dollars. And so it's not just a matter of, ultimately the money does have to come from somewhere. So I appreciate that point that you're making.
Well, I'm not sure that at this point that we know whether we're going to be making any money off of any of these changes that we've made, whether we'll be breaking even or whether we'll be losing money.
Right.
Because of parking changes.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, but that's why it's important to think about. Yeah.
If I might just jump in here for a second. First of all, we heard that we have over 2,400 employees downtown. Is that right?
436.
As we're all aware, workforce is a challenge in all businesses. And I don't think, and we heard Kristen say, a lot of these are part-time employees and they're making maybe less than $10 an hour. I don't think we want to make it more difficult to attract workers if we're going to charge them, hang tags. And also the customers, we have a great, Main Street. I was just thinking, what's the purpose of the parking? The 2 hour, my impression is 2 hours is really for short term for customers, people eating in restaurants. And then the 4 hour was to try and help for, staff. And I have some experience with that as well too, and know the challenges, that it is. It just seems if we want to support the Main Street businesses and the employees, Ames Main Street, did some study, got feedback from people. I understand that there's a revenue issue here, but the question is that we don't want to cripple or hamstring, our businesses and in particular workforce that they rely on. So that we're hearing the hang tags are not going to be well received. The other thing,
Our task is to balance.
the last question is, point is, I think we could force more parking into our neighborhoods. I have a staff member that parks a few blocks away, so she doesn't have to move her car during the day. Sure. And so the point is that's the other thing is you start seeing more and more cars parking, in the.
But why wouldn't that have happened already with the increased enforcement? If you're hearing stories of people having $100, $200 worth of parking tickets, the hang tag system is essentially $1 per working day if you're looking at a month. To me, that seems to Tim's point, a balance between what we have now and going completely free, where you may end up with not a lot of parking for customers then at that point if you have people just parking unlimited all day long with no enforcement at all.
Well, my understanding is that the 2 hour lot, the 2 hour would be, you would not be able to park in there unlimited. So the point is that's for your customers and for your.
Still.
That fills up too.
Yeah.
John or Damien, I have one number that I didn't expect you to come with tonight. Do either of you happen to know off the top of your head that the figure that we're needing to raise as a result of the increase in the parking rates? Is that a number you know?
You mean like year to date, how we're doing?
So we're increasing the parking meter rates.
It's to cover our fees, operating net revenue. Plus, I think the first year is 400 and something $1,000 to transfer to a capital improvement fund. Even by doing that, we have to dip into our available balance. If you remember, it's a negative, and we're ending up with like 116 projected at the end of the fiscal year, 116,000, which is below our 10% balance. So the question will be, if we get to that point, we probably won't be able to move $430,000. If revenue comes in less, we just won't be able to move as much into the capital improvement fund. That's kind of our fail-safe.
So I think you're close to answering my question.
I'll get closer.
The proposal that Sarah was making and Pat were making of 50 cents per hour, if we were to move to that,
Yeah.
And again, if you don't know the number, tell me. But what is the shortfall that would be created by doing that?
That
Have
we
a
would
sense of
definitely
that?
have to calculate.
It's not fair, I don't think, to call it a shortfall. You just wouldn't gain as much money towards building the pot for capital.
Well, I'll call it.
So it is possible to do that. You will just say, I'm making this up, rather than 400,000, you may only collect 200,000.
Yeah.
So
I'm
you
going
will
to call
still
it
be.
a shortfall, though, because we need those funds in order to maintain the parking structure.
Okay, we don't have them now. I mean, we would be collecting less than we wanted to pave our parking lots, but it's substantially more than we have now. I mean,
Okay.
if it's half, it's 200,000. It's a lot more than zero right now.
So I
We
don't know.
would
if
not be
that's-
able to replace or reconstruct the lots as fast as possible, but it's certainly a viable it's an option.
But that argument, though, seems to me to be fallacious, because if people aren't parking and paying, we are not getting $1 per hour at a meter. If people park and pay 50 cents, we're getting 50 cents from the meter, where we might be getting 0 cents from that meter. So
I'm not arguing. I'm not arguing that at all.
But it's tough to tell whether we're going to fall short.
I appreciate
or
the
not.
audience not clapping. Okay, we understand you're in support of that.
I would
okay.
assume we'll get less than the $430,000.
So, Damon, if you could send us that number, if it's not a hard calculation to make, because ultimately, if we don't have the money from the parking meters, and again, to your point, it is our best guess that that's the money will be generated. There's an element of speculation. I think that's fair. We have to at least start with something. Where is that money going to come from? And so then, if it's not going to come from parking meters, then I'm going to be asking myself, where would be the logical places that we'd want to pull money that's currently going towards parking structures from Main Street? Where would be the logical places to pull those funds from? Because it's a zero-sum game. And so if we had that number, that would be a helpful data point for us.
So you're looking for the dollar meters went to 50 cents and then keep the other tiered rates the same as they are?
Correct. Yeah.
Well, I think that wasn't the request not to move all meters to 50 cents? Because we have a dollar, a 75, and a 50-cent meter. So we would be evaluating taking our current rate structure and making it all 50 cents an hour.
I thought that the proposal, when I heard it in the past, and they're here, they can clarify this. And I don't want to take us off task, because it's really not exactly on topic. I'm just trying to get this number. Was that it was particularly on Main Street,
Okay.
that was really the area. So I think the other parking meters they don't care about, but it's the Main Street that it seems to be the onerous.
They want to be higher than Main Street. Don't you want to lower
Yeah.
those?
It wouldn't.
Well, I guess I can let the proponents of the change or
We
speak
could
for
evaluate.
themselves on that. But it's easy to come here and complain about increases. The survey that was done is preposterous, because they ask whether you want your rates to be lowered. Who's not going to say yes to that? What we don't have is the luxury of just magically making parking lots pay themselves. So we have to find ways to generate revenues to do that. And if it's not through parking, then we have to find other ways of doing it. We don't have the luxury of just saying, okay, fine, we'll just lower the rates. The people of Ames also expect us to take care of the other aspects of running the ship. So if you get us that number, that would be a helpful data point for us. Thank you.
We could do both for you. Get just changing the dollar to 50 cents and then changing all to 50 cents.
Sure. Thanks, John.
So if we could backtrack to the employee parking options again, and I'm remembering that when we discussed this last time, I think really the only reason that we eliminated the completely free, so non-hang tag, but allowing you to park all day on half of that lot. The only reason we eliminated that was because we felt that would just cannibalize all of the reserved parking. There's really no reason for reserved parking anymore. And we want people to have some investment in the parking. There needs to be some sort of burden here. Does that sound right? Is that
Yeah, that's true.
I mean,
I was going to
go ahead.
I was going to suggest, I mean, is there any, like the $20 a month is a staff recommendation. Could we compromise on that a little? I was thinking maybe even like $10 a month. Because I agree, I think in order to create turnover and not just have someone park in a spot and to really get people to still use the reserve spots, it is nice to have some mechanism, but I'm certainly sensitive to the fact that $20 a month, as you put it, $1 a working day isn't so bad. But for folks, I think that is a steep bill. And for 10 a month, a couple employees could share it. A business could get a handful of tags for their staff and have them there for staff to use. It seems pretty reasonable to me. So I guess I'd make that motion that we implement an employee hang tag system for $10 a month.
Second.
And just to clarify, would that be a 4-hour?
It would be as it's described here, where the hang tags would be valid in the 4-hour stalls, but it's for, that it's no time limit for them if they have the hang tag.
More clarification, does that, we've got the north side of the lot, south side of the lot, which is 4 hours, which is 2 hours,
The 4 hour is the south side of the lot.
So we have three rows. The north row, which is point south, 2 hours right now.
Yeah.
There's 4 hours, and then you have all on the tracks is reserved. Or most is reserved parking, I believe. And then you also have, is it all 4 hours that's behind Wells Fargo and that block of buildings there?
Yeah, Lot X is the one essentially between the open space and
from Tom Evans Park to the Clark. Is that all 4 hours?
I believe so. Yep.
Okay. And this doesn't change. I mean, this gives an employee an option to, or anyone actually, hit the site. Is it employees only? Is it business owners, or who all can get this? But the point is that right now it says employee. You still have the 4 hour free parking if you want to. You don't have to pay it.
Of course. Yeah.
So that's not going to be changed at all. So.
But I'm sorry, could we just go north to south from the parking lot? The northernmost spots would be 2 hours.
They are 2 hours.
Yeah.
They would remain 2 hours under this proposal. The next
middle
row,
row, kind of middle.
The middle row going south would be the 4 hours, which then only those 4 hour spaces would be eligible for taking advantage of the hang tags to be able to stay there all day. Otherwise, in other areas of the parking lot, then they would really have no effect. The hang tags wouldn't, right?
Right.
And then the bottom, the southmost row remains reserved.
What would be the fiscal impact of shifting from 20 to 10 in terms of total amount projected to be raised?
I think that's difficult to say until we know how many people will turn in their reserved parking for this new option.
But in terms of total dollars raised, I understand 10 is half of 20, but in terms of the total dollars raised, if we're trying to think about amount we might be needing to come up with to offset this.
It'd be
I don't
tough to
think we're gonna
project.
know.
We just have
Yeah.
to see what.
And this is temporary. Again, we're
right.
going to do this
It will be half
in
as
the
amount we had
interim.
before,
Right.
probably.
I don't think all people would turn in their reserve spots because there's quite a bit of value to knowing that's your spot
Yes,
whenever you
I
want
agree.
it.
So we talk about this in our meeting, and I think that we talked about there's 100 spaces, I believe.
That was hypothetical. How many?
Okay,
are there?
There's, 99.
That was close.
So 100 spaces, and let's just assume that you spend at $20 a month times, and if we sold 125, assuming that you're going to sell more than just 100 because you're probably going to give a little more because people may not be on there. That's 30 grand a year. If you cut it in half, it's 15. So the difference is $15,000 total. Is what you're talking about to go from 20 to 10 for 125 if you sell 125, and you may not. People may just say, no, I'll just go ahead and I'll just take my chances.
And we have no idea what it'll shift away from reserved parking or what
Exactly.
parking or fines. I mean, so $20 is 4 fines a month that you pay on time. So depending on how risk averse you are, I mean, I might be willing to pay $10 in advance just to make sure that I don't have to pay the fines, but I don't know what other people will do. It's complicated.
John, I think this proposal that Bronwyn has made seems very reasonable. And does it seem to you that this moves in the right direction? Your comment about wanting to support businesses and to, again, just be generally supportive to our Main Street businesses, is this, in your opinion, a step in the right direction?
I would personally advocate for just trying to give a longer time period. But if council is desirous of generating some revenue, I mean, it's certainly better. It's more palatable than certainly $20 a month, I would think. And again, people have the option; they don't have to, buy the tag. So, and
What do you mean by giving more time?
Making it free.
going to 9-10 hours, but then council voted against that last time, so I'm not going to go back and ask you to reconsider it, but you're asking my general opinion. That's my general opinion.
Okay.
And I'll check back in after some of the discussion we heard from the public on this. It kind of sounds like Main Street Ames has stepped away from the task force. I think that was said. And that the task force is, if we send it to the task force, they're going to say, no, we want it to be free. So I'm not sure what the point would be in redirecting this back to the task force for comment. What does council have thought about this?
What we don't have a pulse on too is that for those of us that work or frequent Main Street a lot, there used to be almost every parking meter was filled before we raised the rates. Now it's a lot less, and so I think that's pushed a lot into the 4-hour lots. People who might have parked on Main Street. So what we don't know is if we lower the parking meter rates, maybe more will go back on Main Street for that 1 or 2 or 3 hours for sake of discussion, which might free up more and alleviate some of the pressures, on the employees they're looking for. Because I mean, it's true. The 4-hour and the 2-hour, they're filled, now. So anyway, so I think it's a multiple issue. So anyway, all right, further discussion. There's a motion made to go to $10 a month, which is the option 1 on the hang tag. Motion and second. Ready to vote? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carried.
Should we take up the question of quantities of these tags and requirements for employees versus available to anyone?
Right.
Go ahead.
Well, I'd move that we make 125 tags available.
Okay.
This is assuming it's 99 that's 99 that would benefit from the hang tags, or is it 99 total?
The 99 was the reserve stall number.
Oh, so that's the wrong number altogether.
Oh, well, shoot.
So, okay, I'll make a motion to have 1.25 times the number of 4-hour spots in the lot that would benefit from the hang tag. So we oversell it somewhat because people come and go in different times and they don't get used. That's stab in the dark.
Is there a second?
I'll second so we can discuss it.
Okay, discussion.
So,
what's
but
the downside?
I would like to have our staff weigh in on this. So do you have a response in terms of, does it seem like a reasonable course?
Well, I think one thing that I could lean on is a good talk with Iowa State. They have a lot of experience in how to manage overselling of stalls, especially the yellow tag, the employee tag. They've done that for years and they know the effect of it. I mean, it's one of the reasons, not to go back, but one of the reasons why we're doing a parking study is because they should be able to comment on, you implement policy X, it takes this long for policy X to show itself or normalize, and it's a good or bad decision. So some of this stuff, we could lean on Iowa State's experience of how to oversell and come back with a number of, here's the 4-hour stalls, we should sell up to this number. You sell over that, you're going to essentially blow out that system or going to overwhelm that system with employees.
This is my concern a little bit. I think your thinking is good, but I'm nervous of just us or on the dais making
Yeah,
up a number.
I withdraw the motion, and how about this? Move to let staff choose an initial number of permits based on whatever procedures they want, and they can just choose that number, report it to us later, and we could always adjust that later if there are problems.
Could you condense that motion?
Sure. So let staff decide the initial number. That's the motion, to let staff.
Of tags to be issued, right?
Yes.
Second.
Discussion?
Sounds good.
Is there really a reason we would want to limit the number of tags, especially if we've got 2,400 employees downtown?
Well, we don't want to.
Staff could
Yeah.
consider that
Not
and
really
not do it.
fair to.
I wouldn't imagine we'd want to excel it to the extreme, oversell them too much. I don't know. That's a
Well,
good
I mean,
question.
if you're willing to spend your $10 a month to take a chance that you're going to get a space, shouldn't you be allowed to have that opportunity?
But Gloria, this is the exact same thing we just talked about. Why not defer to the people who live and breathe this stuff rather than us on the dais making that decision?
I'm not trying to make that decision.
you are,
I'm asking the question, why would we limit it?
Because it's a rational thing to do. I don't want to put myself in the position of people who work with this for a living. It's the same reason we wouldn't arbitrarily set the number here. And I think to go without any number is falling in the same pit because it puts us in the position of trying to overthink this. Let's let the staff work through
Yeah,
this.
the motion is let staff decide number of tags. If they decide it should be 2,400, then they're giving that freedom to them. So,
That's true.
all right. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Are we limiting to employees or it's the general public? I'm not sure what I think.
Well,
go ahead. I would say, I mean, to be useful to employees, it has to be limited. If you'd open it up to the general public, I think it no longer becomes of any use to employees. So I would say, then I think we should.
I apologize. I thought that was included in the earlier motion.
It was.
Oh, I'm sorry.
An employee.
I think
We can move on. If it's
Gloria asked, how are we going to know who the employees are? So I think we'll have to work with the business owners maybe to verify names or something for us, right?
Yeah.
We're not going to be able to check who everybody's, we're not going to bring in a check.
And this would be an annual sort of revision, we're only doing it limited, but
Need some
hypothetically, if
verification from
it
the
did,
business.
Not going to be perfect.
if it did drag out, we'd check back.
Let staff figure that out.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else?
I-
Section 3, go ahead.
No, I mean, it works on this one too. I have a few comments just in general on the topic, and I don't know where to make them, so I'm
On the
parking. No, just parking
go ahead.
downtown in
Go ahead.
general. So hopefully the steps we've taken here, reducing the price of that hang tag, hopefully that'll be amenable to some staff. This is a compromise, as we talked about. If the funding doesn't come from parking revenue, it's going to come from somewhere. So, if you surveyed people and you said, would you prefer your property taxes increase to pay for renovation of city parking lots? The overwhelming response to that survey would be no, I'm sure, So, yeah, the poll response you get depends a lot on the question. So I want to keep that in mind. And also, I think that if there's anger about the increase in parking meter rates, if we encourage that anger, and when people complain, we're like, yeah, that is a lot. That's awful. I think you're shooting yourselves in the foot to a certain extent. I think there are other arguments where you could encourage people, maybe have a bowl of quarters, be like, yeah, I know it went up a lot. We got a lot of costs coming up, or, something like that, that encourages a good feeling about it rather than animosity about it. I feel like it's something we should be thinking about too.
Also,
So thank you.
Well said, thanks.
Well, I have to agree about the issue of perception that Mr. Forrester raised. I have not heard people complaining that this is too much money. I've heard,
The increase.
why
is
did
too
you
large,
increase
yeah.
it so much?
Yeah.
And I am concerned that we may be doing ourselves a disservice by driving people into the free spots and into the neighborhoods and losing revenue because of the increase. But we don't have the data to know that at this point.
We're only 4 months in.
Exactly.
But I am much less copacetic with this than I was when we first made the decision. Because of the things that I have heard from people, and not just from business owners on Main Street, from constituents and people that I just run into on the street who are Ames residents. They are not people who are coming in from out of town. So I don't know that I want us to spend money on a credit card system at this point without knowing where we stand for whether we want to leave our prices the same or not. And maybe there are alternatives, for example, the smart card dispensers that don't seem ideal, but might be a better choice if we study the situation a little bit longer.
Yeah, the big investment of retrofitting them to credit cards, I tend to agree. And with what Kristen said earlier, just that's a big investment without having leapt into the parking study yet. So.
I agree. I think it's too much money to do right now to retrofit all those parking meters. But I wonder, are there still other things we can do to make the system more user-friendly generally to someone who's willing to pay it if it weren't so hard to pay?
I think signage would be amazing.
So signage saying, for instance, where the free lots are?
Where the free lots are, how to pay, information about how the meter's not going to turn green when you pay with your credit card. I think there are creative ways to do some signage in downtown. I'm not going to say it's going to make everyone happy about paying increased fees, but I think being a little more user-friendly would help tamper down some of the concerns.
One of the suggestions that was made during the parking workshop, which I like, is a suggestion to take the first overtime parking offense in the downtown lots associated with a license plate number and turn that into a warning rather than an immediate fine. And the warning would come with a map showing you where the free parking lots are, and it would say something about the parking rates. I think this is a great idea. That it doesn't actually make it easier to pay, but it does make it more user-friendly generally, particularly from people from out of town or people who don't kind of know about the free lots downtown. So that's the sort of thing.
That was one of our options in a previous report that we got. I can't remember the cost associated with it, but there was, right? Am I right, Damien? There was a cost associated with some tracking in the software to do that portion.
Yeah, that's something that the police department would have to ask them what that number is.
I remember, I looked this up. I remember there was a comment on this last year where it was suggested that our current software would probably support it, but we'd have to actually look into it. So I think that's an idea worth pursuing. Some cities actually have only kiosks and pay stations, even on linear streets. I mean, I think it's more common in parking garages, but some do have it on linear streets. I have no idea what the cost differential would be in order to go to that sort of thing on Main Street. And during this interim time, that we might find that to be too disruptive anyway. But that's another sort of thing that could make it easier. A final thing that comes to mind is just the fact that to buy a smart card, you have to write a check or bring cash. I just think that's not very user-friendly because at City Hall, they don't accept credit cards, right, to buy the smart card. And this is, you know, it's a longstanding sort of civic thing where we want people to pay for the services that they use. And so if you are using a credit card and it costs extra for a merchant fee, you want someone to pay for it. It's kind of not the way of the world anymore, though. So those are some things that I think we should pursue, just general user-friendly things. I'm not sure how to turn this into a motion, but can you pursue those things, please? What do you think, Council?
Oh, good
Should I
question.
do?
Well, before we get into the weeds on yours,
Yeah.
in council comments, I will be making a motion to ask staff to look at if we lowered the rates to 50 cents,
Need a motion,
what that
Under-
would,
under
what
council.
fiscal impact that would have, and possible sources of funds which could tap to offset that. So just to give you a heads up, I will be making that motion in council comments.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
So my perception is that no one's interested in direction 3. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, I like
No,
some
this
of,
is part
that's
3.
what David's
we're
talking
discussing.
about, yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's get a motion.
Can you
Let's move-
split off so you mentioned
Yeah.
a few ideas. Can you
Yeah.
split them off?
Which one do you like best?
You want me to motion?
Well, I like the idea of accepting credit cards to pay for the smart cards.
Is that like a no-brainer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
would you, all right, so just, would we be going or referring to staff to find out what that would entail since there is?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
okay.
So yeah, I would move that we get a report from staff on what it would entail to accept credit cards for the purchase of smart cards at City Hall.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
And if it turns out that mechanism can apply to other sorts of payments required, I think that would be friendly for the city of Ames generally, but it's not in your motion.
Oh, sure, like Apple Pay or is that,
Well, what is interesting is that if memory serves me right, the permits, the plumbing permits,
We require taking credit cards
we
now.
require taking credit cards. So there has to be a vehicle some way already here in the city hall. So the question is, does it get expanded? We'll let staff come up with that then.
yeah.
All right, there's a motion.
That's fine.
Okay, for discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, so let me try one. I would move to get a report from staff on a warning system for first-time overtime offenders.
Second.
Discussion?
I think this idea has a lot of merit. We are a hospitality community, and we invite lots of people from all over to come to our downtown. And if this was a way of saying, thank you for coming, sorry this didn't work out, giving a warning, I think that communicates a value that we have. So I think this is a good idea to look at.
I thought we had already requested that
We
from the
have that
police.
information. Can't
Yeah.
you just send us the old
I don't
report?
remember.
I know we have it.
We
I'm
requested it
100%
from the
positive.
police and
Yes.
they gave us
They
a
said they had the
report back.
capabilities, I
Oh, it
think,
didn't-
recently.
Well, we'll check and either
Well,
get that
let's
same
just-
report back or.
Let's get it back and then we can take action on it then.
Yep.
Those in favor, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Never mind.
Those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried.
No.
Oh,
Wait,
I'm saying no because I thought we've already had it.
5-1.
it's just, they can just dig it up and get it back to us then.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a new report.
Yep, just get the information either way.
Okay, so if it's not a new report, then I guess I'm in favor of it.
All right, 6-0. Anything else?
Did we look at pay stations downtown for pay and display as opposed to smart card distribution? I can't remember.
As far as that being an option
Yes.
that we would consider, I think that was when, the way I heard the discussion was that would be one of the things, or one potentially something our consultant with that parking study would evaluate.
Okay.
And of the host of solutions compared to our market, what is appropriate? I mean, that's essentially what we're asking the parking consultant
Okay.
to evaluate for us.
Thanks.
Anything else? Otherwise, we're going to move on. Thank you, Damien. Thank you, John. Appreciate your time. Item 21, staff report on short-term rentals.
While staff is coming up, I'd just like to point out that we have a meeting with the student government at Iowa State tomorrow night, and this is a topic that we may be discussing some tomorrow night as well. So if anyone here who's interested in the topic of short-term rentals wants to be able to follow up, you should just be aware of that meeting. I imagine that we'll be concentrating more on how it pertains to renters than owners of properties, but it's unclear.
Kelly.
Good evening, Council. Tonight, we're reporting back on requested information from the City Council. We gave you a report outlining different categories for short-term rentals as they related to 1 and 2 family homes at your October 23rd meeting. Just to refresh everyone's memory, there were 4 categories, including bed and breakfast, and then 3 new short-term rental options. City Council asked for some additional information specifically about whether apartments and condominiums would be allowed to have the same benefits as the 1 and 2 family. In the first proposal in October, staff had left those uses out of the equation, feeling that those weren't something that had to be addressed as a use that was necessary or maybe even desirable in that situation, which you asked for more information on. We've provided that to you. Eloise did a quick survey and would estimate that maybe 30% of the listings in October were for apartment or condominium type housing units rather than 1 and 2 family units. One of the key issues with dealing with apartments as condominiums is the ownership pattern. Could be different than how it's set up for the 1 and 2 family. The 1 and 2 family system is mainly set up to be as an accessory use to the primary occupant and owner of the house, with the vacation rental being the absentee landlord option. Apartments are pretty much all absentee landlord. Condominiums are apartment buildings or apartment dwellings in our vocabulary in the zoning ordinance. They are just an ownership pattern that allows for you to own a unit within a multi-unit building. So for us, when we talk about condominiums and apartments, the building would look the same to us in the zoning code. It's just who would be able to be the owner and authorized to apply for such a permit. So what we've identified for you is some options of how to look at apartments. I think staff has some concerns about, do we need to be in the middle of how leases and subletting is done through landlords and tenants? I don't believe that's something that we ventured into previously. On the flip side of that, there still is potentially the benefit of licensing and city acknowledging and recognizing these uses throughout the city, regardless of what type of housing they're in. So we've presented some of the discussion points for that and made a recommendation that potentially in the higher density areas, such as RH or maybe in Campus Town, those areas could be self-regulated and be allowed if that's the interest of the council, but not require licensing. We did feel that maybe where there are apartments or maybe converted homes into apartments in medium density or lower density areas, possibly you would keep the same licensing requirements as you would for 1 and 2 family homes. So we would need direction in regards to the apartment issue to proceed. It's not something the Planning and Zoning Commission considered. So it would be a new issue brought into the ordinance process. So we would need to go back to the Planning and Zoning Commission with the concept drafted out so they can make a recommendation to the council of what their feelings are on how to amend the zoning ordinance to deal with apartments. The second issue specifically requested information on were some details about how the hospital medical zoning district is set up in terms of allowed uses, and then specifically about how Mary Greeley uses a variety of homes or structures that they own as well. So there's a few privately owned homes in the district, and then Mary Greeley has a few structures on their main hospital parcel, as well as one extra parcel that they have a home structure on. That district, when it was established, was really meant to be a commercial district. It doesn't allow for residential uses. So we did not originally put the proposal forward as allowing for this within this district. Because of the small number of properties, there's different directions you could go on whether you want to recognize those non-conforming single-family structures as eligible to do this. We would again have to go amend the zoning ordinance itself to first allow residential uses. before we could implement the suggested structure for these short-term rentals. So we would need direction on that as well. And that would really be a separate amendment to to change the zoning ordinance. And again, that would have to go back to the Planning and Zoning Commission as a change to a base zone, special purpose zoning district to even allow for residential uses in the first place. So all in all, there were two smaller issues. The overall structure we went through in greater detail back in October. What we tried to do for you at the end of the report was bring it back to kind of what we think are the three topics on the table, which we described as options in the staff report. So option one was to get direction on the 1 and 2 family classifications, which we gave you the longer report in October on. We recommended that you proceed with an annual licensing requirement and the 4 categories as described in October. So option 2 for the multifamily apartments and condominiums, that's something we need direction on tonight. We need to understand how you would want to permit them or not permit them, who an applicant would need to be, and then would you require licensing the same as you would for single family and 2-family homes. And the option 3 issue is around the hospital medical district. As I just said, we would need direction on allowing residential uses or not, to consider them as accessory uses to hospital functions as they somewhat are now. And then we would need to look at how to address that in the zoning ordinance. So that's the conclusion of what we had for you at your request from the last meeting.
So Kelly, is with regard to the hospital medical district question, if we have nonconformities right now, and we were interested in possibly changing our ordinance, does the nonconforming ordinance language we're looking at later have implications for this discussion?
So in regards to 1 and 2 family structures,
No, with regard to the hospital medical zone. Or maybe the.
the later item is citywide, all zoning districts, that the broad category of a non-conforming use and whether you can expand it as a general concept for all zoning districts, all uses. So for hospital medical, the issue is that single family dwellings are not a permitted use. So 3 private residences?
Yes.
So there's 3 private residences in that district where they're single family structures and they're lived in as single family homes. They're considered a non-conforming use. How you swap out a household use within that single family structure is not a change in intensity of use. So the way we've proposed this is that if it's a principal residence of the property owner, the SDR function is accessory. So it's not an expansion of use. The vacation home rental itself is a totally different use. So it's not related to whether it's non-conforming or not. It would need to be written into the code as either allowed or not allowed.
If I might, I have a long list of things that I want to talk about with STRs. And so I just want to warn you, and I sort of think that we're probably not going to finish this tonight. At least I hope we're not going to finish this tonight.
I would like to finish it tonight.
Yeah, but we're talking to students tomorrow, right?
Well,
Part of the idea was to get feedback from them, but maybe
We have asked Ally to help facilitate bringing student input. I mean, I don't know if you have any.
So maybe that's not it. Anyway, all right, if we just want to tackle them, my first question is, well, first, I would like to see a licensing requirement in part to ask people on a yearly basis to reapply for their license. Maybe it's just administrative approval, but I would also like to see proof that the hotel motel tax has been paid for the properties. Now, I understand Airbnb does that automatically. It's great. You just say, I'm an Airbnb person, and then it's covered. But for other sorts of rentals, you have to do something else. So that's one of the reasons I think we want a licensing structure. We want to be able to say to people, no, not next year. Something went wrong. So in relation to that, my question is, what do we do with hosted home shares, with licensing hosted home shares with people who, for example, are on the sexual offender register? Do we really want to be licensing people in that circumstance? And do we have to make a list of risky licensing things like that? Does it open the city to liability? Or is
you
it
take a step back on that one? I guess we haven't heard this one before. So
right? So it's one of my concerns. So what do we do if someone who is not allowed to live near a school or a church because of their presence on a sexual offender registry wants to run a hosted home share? They come to the city and apply for a license. What is our burden? What do we need to do here from a legal point of view to cover the city, but also what's the right thing to do?
We don't do that now when they apply for an LOC. I mean, we're
Okay,
not verifying any of that information now.
LLCs you're not living in the house with people.
You can.
You could be.
Yeah.
Could be, okay.
So, you're asking somebody doesn't already live in the home and they're looking to acquire it and then to operate a hosted home share?
Say they already live in the home and they want to rent out their extra bedrooms using a hosted home share.
I guess I don't know what, if they're already living there, I'm not sure how that list would have any bearing on the decision to license it or not. We would have, I don't have any.
What's legal question on Mark?
I haven't seen anything on that.
Mark, I think it's a
I
legal-
don't think we've.
Do we have an obligation to check backgrounds and deny licensure based on a lot of things, one being that?
I don't believe we do because, I mean, you've got to presume that people, if they're going to, short-term rent a place, that they would check into the background of the person before they would go live with them. And they may or may not do that, but I think that's their responsibility, not the city's. I don't think the city has any liability if we give someone a short-term rental license and it turns out they're on the sex offender registry, they can get a letter of an LLC right now and rent out a place. I mean, I really don't see any difference. I don't think the city has any liability in that situation.
And I don't know about other vendors, but Airbnb does do sex offender registry checks and checks the OFAC terrorism list as well.
Right, so they have an awareness of some responsibility as a vendor.
Yeah.
Do other cities do anything along these lines, or is it just really nothing to worry about? This is what I don't know and why I'm asking.
I have not seen anything on that topic in any of the research that I've done.
Same here in the ordinances I've looked at. I haven't seen anything addressing anything along these lines.
Okay.
What else you got, David?
Well, I mentioned that I think that we should require registration be provided to the city with proof of tax payment for renewal of the hotel tax, and require a record of guests who actually use the rental and penalties for violation. Maybe the penalty is just not renewing the license in the following year. The home share, that is the whole home share. I'm quite concerned about that. I guess that's the third column, what we have up here. I'm concerned about how it sets us up for providing the spaces to people who haven't undergone the full LOC safety inspection. There's the fire inspection, but there are other aspects that aren't covered under the fire inspection, such as carbon monoxide detectors, ground fault circuit interrupter outlets, gas appliances in bedrooms, bathrooms, handrails and guardrails. None of that is required without an LOC, at least that's my understanding. So do we really want to say to whoever owns a house, that you can go ahead and let people stay in it on a short-term basis without those safety provisions that we actually do provide for rentals generally?
What's the difference if the person who owns the home is staying there with them that day or not? If the proper safety precautions aren't in place in either case?
That's a good point. I think that having someone on site generally will help you sort out the space better than not having someone on site when you're left to your own, but that's kind of a weak argument. So that's a good point.
Yeah, I don't know.
The hosted home share, in not requiring an LOC, apparently can happen anywhere throughout the city in spite of the rental caps. I think that's a bad dynamic. The vacation rental does require an LOC, but it can really change the dynamic of a neighborhood, right? And it provides a commercial incentive to buy properties when we just went through like a year of discussion about residential character rather than commercial character.
I have concerns about that too, David, primarily because we did have affordable housing on our minds doing those rental housing caps. And I don't see how this does not have that same overtone that we're making it possible for people to rent homes that could be sold as affordable housing units.
But if it's in a non-cap neighborhood and someone's able to buy it to rent it versus to buy it to do a short-term rental with, what's the difference there?
I think it's a qualitative different use of a property when you have renters who are there every week than when it
I guess
changes.
I mean the financial incentive
Yeah.
is still, you know.
I would say it's a similar incentive, I guess.
Yeah, and I just I don't like the idea of having the homes without the owners present and the revolving door of guests. And what other cities have seen is that they are trying to scale back from their STR ordinances because they allowed so many things, and now they're discovering predatory practices where it's not just the individual from, another neighborhood or someone coming in from Boone or Nevada and buying one house. They have actual companies that come in and buy multiple homes for investment. And so there are ordinances that are being scaled back in cities around the country because of those predatory practices.
Does staff have any kind of verification that what Gloria said is true when you've investigated this?
Well, be more clear, I guess, what are
So the city that is on the top of my mind right now, because I just saw something the other day, is New Orleans. They've discovered that investment companies are coming in and buying up affordable properties and turning them into STRs.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have that problem right now, but we need to be conscious of whether what we are doing in this ordinance makes it possible for that to occur. And we all acknowledge that we already have an affordable housing crunch here in Ames. So are we exacerbating that situation potentially in the future by opening the door further for vacation rentals?
But say someone gets an LOC, they're not in a cap neighborhood, they get an LOC for rental, and there's nothing we have in terms of a code that says they have to rent to the same person for the whole year, right? They could turn that renter over. So what would stop someone in this case? We're saying we allow it, but what would stop them if we said we weren't going to allow it in this way from just going out and getting an LLC and then just doing it anyway?
Yeah, I mean, we already have property management companies that own multiple single-family homes in Ames. It's I don't know. Seems like we're overthinking it.
So for Bronwyn's question, that's the current situation. That's not legal in the city because you're not having the average tenant stay meet our definition of household living.
I
So
see.
You're right. We don't monitor leases. We don't.
Right. We don't police.
We don't worry whether. There's a lot of things we don't worry about, but there is a code standard about the average length of stay, which makes you residential instead of lodging. And that's where this all comes from, because our current code defines this activity as lodging, which is not allowed as a residential use.
I see. Yep. But it would be complaint based only currently.
Correct, unless we were to just go on Airbnb and see how many people are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So that's the genesis of why we are here, is that what staff is advocating to address it one way or the other, because right now It's not in the code, so it's not allowed. It's clearly an activity that's happening. There's interpretation issues between rental compliance and zoning compliance, and we need direction one way or the other to permit it or not to permit it, so that we can communicate to the general citizenry how you can do this or that you can't do this in Ames.
So John, I'd like to have some guidance from you. It seems like we're now going in a number of different directions. Would you like someone to make a motion to see if it would fly, or would you recommend that we take this topic and break it up into logical components to see if there's consensus? What would you suggest we do?
Well, I think first we'll see if there's any public input, and then I think we'll take it in logical, bite-sized chunks, I think, unless someone has an overarching motion.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments for staff at this point? Or Kelly, do you have one you want to make?
I'm just curious, are we taking comment on the two new issues, or are we taking comment on the October information that was?
No, it's just on our report today.
Okay. So just to remind everybody, the direction tonight is to proceed with drafting an ordinance. So it's not decided tonight. It's to put it in a format. We've given a rough draft of it with the October. It's not a finalized draft. So with direction, it'll go back to that, and then it'll be an actual public hearing for first reading, which would obviously be allowed for public comment again on the actual literal details of everything. So that's what we're looking for tonight, is direction on how to proceed.
Right, but I think we don't want to get into a situation where we're editing the ordinance
correct.
every meeting.
That's why we did this process, was to bring you as close to a draft so you can understand where it was going and not have to pick it apart without having seen it in great detail.
So public input.
So public input, you said it's only the new stuff, the multifamily and the hospital
Right.
medical? Okay.
Because we had public input last time.
Okay.
Is anybody in the audience that would like to, I'll open a public comment on, this is strictly limited to the items contained in the staff report, which is adding clarification of multifamily apartments and condos and hospital medical zoning district relative to short-term rentals. Is there anybody who wants to address council? Seeing none, I close public comment. If I might just take a moment of privilege here, a lot of us went over to the National League of Cities and sat through a number of work sessions and sat through several that were on, affordable housing. And I'm probably beating a dead horse here a little bit, but I'm not sure I really have a clear vision or understand a clear vision that we have for our neighborhoods and what we want them to look like. And one of the things that was stressed is that what we have for affordable housing is current stock, and it's usually stock which is more in the lower price range. And I know of some people I've talked to that say that the VRBO is extremely profitable. They much rather buy something and have someone come for a few weekends. They'll make a lot more money on it than they will renting it, by the month. And we have a workforce challenge. We have people that want to live in the community. And so it would seem to me important to factor in that we're trying to preserve the affordable stock for people who want to live there and contribute to the neighborhoods, and not be building into or creating more and more commercial enterprises and opportunities, or we're going to see that continue to grow, because there are people that see that as a very viable and driven by cost, driven by profit, not being driven by what's best for the neighborhood, what's best for the community. So I just urge caution in particular. It's an important piece for our community. So as you go ahead and enter into this conversation now, I asked for the privilege because it's not it's not relative to multifamily apartments and condos. But it is something as we move forward into the next step of giving staff direction. This chart that we see here right now is my understanding. That's kind of what's going to be presented. Is that correct, Cal? That's going to be woven into the ordinance. Is that accurate?
Correct. So along with this is a summary. This is not the text itself. There was a more text-driven version of this with more detail, but this is trying to give you on one page what the essence of the ordinance would address.
It would seem that the home the hosted home share and bed and breakfast is certainly very consistent with you have people that are living in the homes. That's not the issue. It's when you start getting the home share and the vacation rental that starts to blur over into it. And yes, to your point, Ron, well, people could probably buy them and turn them into rentals in those areas. You're right. That's a very fair counterpoint. But that's not true for home share. That's kind of a hybrid, where there's no LLC required. My concern is our question is, what's the vision for our neighborhoods? And is it going to be driven by commercial interests and whatever happens, or is it going to be we want to really be encouraging and preserving that stock that we do have? Because certainly the houses that are being built that are new are not being built that many people can afford, as first-time home buyers, and that I think is really important. And that's the future of our workforce. People aren't going to be able to afford $300,000-$400,000. Well, some may be able to, but I think most probably won't. So I'm just trying to help us keep focused on citywide what we're trying to accomplish, while still supporting this transition, but just knowing from firsthand. And I'll close with this. And repeat myself: these are profitable, and it will attract people who may come in and want to start accumulating them for that very reason. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thank you for the privilege. All right, direction for staff.
Public input, or there was none?
We
There
did.
wasn't any.
Pardon me?
No.
So you have option 1, option 2, option 3.
Or combinations.
Or combinations, right?
Well, I think that we should allow the short-term rentals with apartments without further regulation. I'm not sure how to put this in a motion, so.
You want to do it in pieces? So
Let's do the pieces. Let's take option 1. Is there a motion on option 1? This is the, and maybe clarify, Kelly and Steve, are these all standalone options, or if option 1 is picked, is option 2 have some conflicts with option 1, or are they additive and they're standalone?
So they're basically standalone. So option 2 has a 1, 2, 3 attached to it so that it doesn't just inherently conflict if you pick parts of it. So you would have to address 1, 2, and 3 so there's not inherent conflicts.
So council go option 1, option 2, 2, and then not do anything with option 3, and there's not going to be any conflicts or any issues then. Is that correct?
Correct. So in our mind, it's all set up to work. We'll make it work if that's the motion.
Yeah. Thanks for
We
doing it
have
that way.
questions on the
Okay.
table that need to be answered.
So I would move option 1 that we draft standards for 1 and 2 family short-term rentals with a one-time permit and annual licensing with proof of hotel motel tax collected annually.
So we can't have both permit and license.
I'm sorry, just the
Annual
annual license,
Yeah.
yeah.
For all types, hosted home share, vacation rental, bed and breakfast already exists.
Yes.
All right, so let's get
Yes.
clarification. So it's option 1, which is single family and 2 family STRs with
Annual licensing
annual license. Okay.
and proof of collection of hotel motel tax.
Okay. Thank you.
But, so vacation, is my motion saying that LOCs would still be required for vacation? Okay, I just want to make sure I wasn't overriding that.
I'll second.
So,
Discussion.
so that's for the 4 categories that we've looked at previously.
Yes.
Yes. So I will not be voting to support this because I don't support the non-owner occupied uses.
So pragmatically, and I think I will be supporting this, but pragmatically, what is involved in showing proof of payment of the hotel motel tax?
We'll have to decide that, but I mean, I'm sure just looking at some kind of copy of a remittance to the state. Remember, you're remitting this to the state. We don't actually get the revenue. So they'd have to show us some document that the state has received the tax. So I don't know what that is yet because we don't, but we'll look into that.
Or you might be able to find that if they report their rentals through a platform that is understood to remit
We're not
tax.
going to do the research. They're going to have to submit documentation. So from administration perspective, you're going to have to, with your renewal, give us some document that shows you did what you were supposed to do to pay taxes.
Okay, or we could
We're
ask
not
you.
going to assume that because you may have rented something on a software platform that you did what you were supposed to do under the
But I
law.
thought that if I stay in a bed and breakfast or an Airbnb, I should say, I make my payment to Airbnb, not to the particular owner, and then Airbnb pays the owner and they would pay the tax.
So it's one platform.
Right. But let's just stay with Airbnb for the sake of discussion. So we have to make sure that there's a reasonable capacity for me as the owner to have some kind of record that Airbnb in fact paid that. I don't know how easy that is.
So like I said, we'll have to look into it a little bit. I don't feel like it's a challenging thing to require, so we'll report back to you on the feasibility of doing.
So if it turns out that this is really difficult to do, you'll tell us we were crazy, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be.
You'll never
I don't believe it's an irrational request.
He might think it, but he won't say it.
And hopefully people in the audience or people who are watching who are involved with Airbnb will give us feedback as far as the viability of this as well.
Okay, what else? Any other discussion? You understand the motion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Nay.
Chris, for you, yes?
Yes.
All right, motion passed 4-2.
I'll move option 2, sub 2. So this is to allow for STRs in all apartments in all zoning districts, period.
Is there a second?
Now, we'll clarify, is it all apartments or is it all apartments and multi-family structures?
As described by Tim, it's all apartment buildings, which is 3 or more units in any building is an apartment building.
Is that what you meant, Tim?
And in any zoning.
Yeah, I just took the language from the staff report,
I just wanna
but
make
that's what I intended.
I'll second.
So does that include condos then?
So condos are not a building type. They're just an ownership pattern. So if you own a condo in a multi-unit building, you're permitted to do it by this motion.
And this motion doesn't address ownership type or yes?
So the way this will be different than the prior one is that the motion is to not require a license. So the zoning ordinance will put this use in as accessory, but there will not be in the separate licensing chapter any requirement for you to provide documentation to the city or to do anything annually with us. So
Just sanctions it allows.
Yep. So the zoning ordinance will acknowledge it can happen, but there won't be a license requirement.
So
Was there a second?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, there was.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Amber,
Thanks.
second.
Yeah, so I talked to it with our director of student residency, Dosman, about it. He had some initial concerns about mostly liability issues and like how insurance would work, especially since I feel like on a landlord to landlord basis, honestly, he's kind of my point man there, so I don't know that much about it. But he had some initial concerns, and he's meeting with his committee tonight to discuss it. So that's why I wanted to make some initial further discussions tonight, but then have tomorrow as an opportunity to talk more about it, especially since I thought that would be a better opportunity because we haven't had that. I mean, I am the spokesman for them, but I thought it would be better, especially to have Dawes there, who is the director of student residency, who has better input than probably I can provide right now. But I am in support of option 2, the second one, because I think that 31% is a substantial number, even if it's not exact. I think that's over a quarter. And so I guess that's all the input I want to give now.
Sorry, what's the 31% of? What?
The
Self-reported
listings
So in the report, our quick snapshot of October use, that's 31%. Is that right?
Okay, that one. Okay.
Yeah.
I assume that's where the number is coming from.
Yeah. Sorry.
So it seemed like one of the things that we were counting on with regard to the multifamily apartments was landlords and leases. But condos are owned by people. There are no landlords involved. There may be homeowners associations involved, but we don't have leases for the condos unless someone is renting the apartment or the condo, passing on that facility to someone else. If someone's living in their condo, they aren't under a lease if they own it. And so I'm wondering what kind of control we have then over that kind of proliferation of sale of condos, which also has occurred in the large urban areas and college towns. There is actually a website that highlights the best college towns to buy short-term rental investment properties in. And so I'm trying to keep us from making decisions that may have ramifications we're not considering down the road.
Okay, I have a question, Mark, and maybe you can't answer this, but let's say this goes through. Does a city ordinance trump a lease, or does a lease trump an ordinance?
Depends.
Because if landlords don't want short-term rentals.
Well, just because it's allowed doesn't mean that the landlord has to allow it.
So landlords could trump the ordinance, say, no.
In that case, the lease would, whatever the lease is between the landlord and tenant would trump it.
Just like an HOA could prevent them from.
In condos.
Right,
Mhm.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So just because there's a ordinance saying that this is an allowable use in apartments, and it doesn't mean that landlords then are required to allow that. So they could still have leases that don't
I just
allow
didn't want to
subletting.
see some renters saying, hey, it's allowed by the city, and all of a sudden they use that and get into an issue with the landlords essentially. So,
But
thank you.
But I think this is a meaningful change, right? The presumption under Iowa law is that subleasing is permitted unless it's forbidden by the rental agreement, right?
I'm not sure on that, honestly. I don't know, but I don't know a lease that doesn't contain
control on subleasing.
Yeah, subleasing language that says you can't sublease without the landlord's approval. I don't think there are leases out there that don't say that. Maybe scattering of them, but anyone that has a decent lease is going to have language in there saying no subletting without the landlord's approval.
But still, this would flip the burden onto the landlord to do something or ensure that their current rental agreement covers this situation in order to prevent their what they think of maybe as a stable rental turning into like a nightly rental.
Yes, yeah, but again, I think most leases already cover this. I mean, most standardized leases are going to have that language in them. And leases are typically a year or so, so it's the landlord could add those provisions to at lease renewal time.
So what are the implications if the council doesn't just eliminates this altogether and votes this down? Does that mean that a tenant could not rent a room out?
It would depend on how long, not on a nightly basis. They won't meet that average stay requirement that we have in our code.
Okay. Which goes back to your lodging versus your.
So it's yeah. So how exactly do you measure lodging versus household living? Right. We don't have a great tool for that, but if that's what we had to start doing, we'd have to figure out how we would look at that and how you'd cite people and prosecute it. So I don't think we've had to ever prosecute the length of stay standard of our code, but it's questionable at times.
And how is staff gonna monitor, inspect, enforce this?
Which parts?
We don't have to.
You wouldn't have to.
That's sort of the point of
Yeah,
this.
that's the point.
Yeah.
It's already happening.
We talked about this last
Yeah.
time. I respectfully do not want our city staff to be tasked with trying to enforce a ban on Airbnbs and rentals. And I look forward to anyone who would like to make a case to the contrary. And secondly, we have had, to my knowledge, no complaints with respect to Airbnb situations with rentals. And if anyone's had any, I'd love to hear a response on that. Third issue, in general, we should not be weighing in on creating ordinances unless there is some kind of substantial justification. So we just, we can't speculate what evils might happen. We have to make decisions based on the information that we have now. So that's why I think we should do this option 2 too.
All right, any further discussion?
For this option, my concern was mainly about making sure that the landlord has a good opportunity to decide the use of their property. And it sounds like that's probably covered under this. So to that extent, I have concerns about other aspects, but the rental part is okay.
So David, to address this point, landlords now have this situation in all kinds of scenarios. For example, if a landlord is renting to a tenant and the tenant has a boyfriend or girlfriend come and spend the weekend, that's probably going to be in violation of the visitor's provision in the lease. But we leave that to the landlord.
Yeah,
If it
I'm
becomes a
agreeing,
problem-
right?
So I think this is in keeping with respecting the relationship between landlord and tenant.
All right, let's vote. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No,
So this one will go back to the planning commission. We'll
Right.
have to put a little more flesh on the bone here about exactly how this works in the zoning ordinance and meet some other definitional things, but that's,
Okay. Anything on option 3?
so I'm concerned about the fact that we do not have compliance right now within our hospital medical zone. And I think we need to have a discussion about that, but I don't think it's the STR discussion right now. It's a discussion of whether the hospital medical zone needs to be adjusted or not. And so I would rather we return to this as a separate code issue that's not focusing on STRs at this point. Because we do have non-conforming uses. We have the use of a house by the hospital that in a way that's not technically legal according to our code right now. And so I think we need to have a discussion, but not tonight.
So just for clarity then, the 3 houses that are single-family homes, would STRs under option 1, are STRs allowed or not allowed? Would it cover in the IGM?
they're not allowed in the first draft.
Just so you know that. This is the 3 that are not the, just want to make sure you understand it. So that would not be allowed in the HM, which is okay with us. Just want to clarify.
Yeah, well, for now, but I think we can't discuss the STR situation till we discuss the ordinance situation. If I understand the kind of domino effect.
No?
I mean, you can
No?
discuss it. We need direction on how to proceed with amending the hospital medical district if we're going to amend it.
Right, which would require that we have a discussion about that.
Right? It doesn't directly change anything about the STR matrix. It's just whether that use is allowed in the zone or not.
And I'm just clarifying, it's not going to be allowed under option 1.
It's not under the motion that passed already.
So if you ever want to put it in, now might be the time to do it.
It's already happening, right?
Yeah.
No.
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 That we know of.
Well,
I mean,
it might be happening.
So in general,
It's a different question.
the Equal Protection Clause says that government should try to treat similarly situated parties the same. And I am concerned that we have a part of town where we're going to say, we're going to treat you differently. It's a single family residence. We're going to treat you differently. I think the burden is on us to justify why we would treat those differently.
So we have done this in other districts. In this draft, all the commercial zones except for neighborhood commercial, because it has quite a variety of things, we're not allowing SDRs if you have a non-conforming house. So we're treating the hospital medical district just like an HOC property or any other commercially zoned property that might have some older non-conforming house still in it.
Okay, that's fair then.
Even
As
an
long-
industrial
As
zone.
long as we're not just sort of singling this out.
No, I don't think we're singling it out at all. I think we have chosen as staff to recommend that non-conforming houses don't have the benefit of becoming these other uses that
Okay.
aren't contemplated as the future of those zoning districts.
Thank you.
And one final thing from me anyway, I'm concerned about the possibility of adults bringing large numbers of children to town and basically over-occupying a short-term rental because children aren't counted as occupants under the way it's currently drafted. So I would move to limit the occupancy based on the number of people rather than just the adults, and exempt only children who are dependents of adult guests.
Repeat that again, please. Limit occupancy to
Based on the number of people. See, this chart here limits occupancy base, it has numbers for occupancy. So that limit should be based on the number of people present and exempting only children who are dependents of adult guests.
Doesn't that take you all the way up to adulthood for most kids?
No, he's saying if they're not dependents.
So if I'm bringing my youth church group to town and I've got 6 kids with me, that would not be allowed.
But then we're getting into that who's a family thing. And
Yeah,
how
I
do
don't know how you would
prove-
enforce it either. If they're there for a night and by the time someone complains and then,
It's hard to enforce, I agree, but
All right.
some people will read it and say,
There's a motion.
I don't
Let's-
do it.
Is there a second?
Oh.
There's no second, no discussion. Motion died for lack of second. All right, anything else? On STRs? And the chart that is in front of us is what's going to be put in the ordinance.
You have to adjust it.
Well, I mean, sorry.
Option 2.
The 4
Not
columns.
exactly, but
4 different categories.
those categories will be what's addressed in the ordinance.
I know you don't want to use, I think the chart was very helpful for me going through and looking at it. I know you were hesitant about having it, but I think it's easy to kind of get one page look at. So.
I appreciate the staff. And then I also wanted to say a word of thanks to the people. Some of the people have been following this issue for over a year as we work through this. So thank you for your patience and input along the way.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute recess. We'll come back after. Main Street. Kelly?
So item 22, alterations to the depot. This is more of an informational item looking for concurrence from the council from the property owner that their proposed actions are consistent with the development agreement. We've tried to describe to you what we're aware of as external changes to the depot. They're trying to remodel the western portion of the building to be a restaurant, which they're asking for some outdoor changes. The most substantial ones are really in the rear of the building, where they're looking to expand the cooler into multiple coolers and add a smoker, and then screen in about 50 feet of the building. We think that you can find it not to detract from the historic qualities of the depot and find it consistent with the development agreement.
Did you run this by the Historic Preservation Commission?
No, we have not.
Is that something that will happen or no?
There's
this
no
is just
purview of the
council?
HPC on this building.
Okay.
Development agreement just says that the
Council.
doesn't say who, so it defaults to the city council.
Oh, sure.
Do you have the images you could put up there? Or?
Image of?
Well, could you show the plans that are?
Correct. So, whoa. So just to help orient you, Main Street is to the north. The areas we're talking about is the covered patio on this west end of the building is going to be maintained as an open area. They want to add an outdoor service area and bar. A future improvement is this open space to be made into a seating area. And then the area that I was talking about that would be screened in is approximately a 50-foot area in the rear of the building back here. And then we did have floor plans with the staff report to help you understand what's changing. So I'm going to assume that the rear is the one that's of interest to people. So I do have to orient this way so you can read it. So what you see in this hatching is a platform that's being built to bring it up to the floor level of the interior so that they can walk out on level and not downstairs to the equipment. You can see where the coolers are shown, and then this area would be all screened in by a perforated metal screen. There's some other incidental things happening. A ramp for accessibility is being reoriented in this area as well. So the main reason that staff, it does obstruct the structure. There's no doubt about it. You can't get around that issue. So staff's determination was based on that the footprint of change is within the overhang. It does not go beyond the original columns of the overhang. So you have those elements still there. And there's no permanent change to the openings of the building that are proposed. So while it obscures features, it wasn't permanently taking out features of the building from the original design. So that's where we came to the conclusion that it's possible to find it to be consistent with the historic qualities of the building. It does obviously take away open space that was meant for passage of people and pedestrians previously.
Are there any elevations of what that's going to look like on the south side?
I do not have that. That was not provided to us.
Okay.
So I can't show you a material sample or an elevation about the exterior.
Yeah. It's not visible for much though, right? There's a fence on the train tracks there anyway, right? At that point?
Yeah, one of the things that, I know it's hard to see on here, but the station master's window, in my opinion, is really a key piece to the depot, and that's actually the bow window. And I'm presuming they're keeping that as an active window, and there's going to be a cooler that's going to be right there. So when you walk in, I'm presuming you'll be able to see through that window, and you're just going to look at right into a cooler, essentially. And
so this is really dark, but that window you're talking about is right here. there's a cooler that was installed long ago right next to that. And that's what's going to be extended further down and then screened. So you don't just have the backside of a cooler out there. But what Mr. Hale is describing is true. You're going to obscure those doorways in that original window area.
So the question really is, it goes down to that item 3, design qualities. Is that correct, Kelly, in the agreement? That's what we're really being asked to
The
judge.
historic qualities of the depot is the phrase. Yeah, the historic qualities of the depot is the phrase that's used, and without defining each element of the depot that was considered critical at the time the agreement was written.
I didn't even know that was there, to be honest with you. That window. I mean, so in terms of like, I don't know if it's still present, but in terms of noticeable features of the depot,
Impacted.
the impact seems reasonable.
Well, just trying to look at this. Apologize for my professional thing coming in. It's the issue of, the only sense I could see it really would be a point, and that is alterations or additions to the depot shall be compatible with the exterior historic qualities thereof. And what are the exterior historic qualities? So that almost becomes a pretty subjective.
Yeah.
It does.
And at least they're not taking it out.
So, I mean, we tried to think through what those qualities are when we were making our assessment. They're obviously original building materials. There are original openings. It's the context of the building. It's how people use the building. How do you flow through the site? All of those are things. I mean, when it's a subjective term, but when you get into historic review, it means a lot to an historian and to an architectural historian. So it's a term of art that has more meaning than just a flippant comment about, historic qualities. So there's a lot that goes into making these kinds of decisions when you're really evaluating the integrity of an historic structure.
And you did that and found that.
So in our estimation as staff, that's what we focused on, were the original openings, the building materials, the footprint, to make those conclusions.
It's fair to say that if this cooler had been located in front, then you might have thought about it differently.
If absolutely.
Yeah.
Other questions for Kelly?
I guess the only question I have is why we didn't run it past the HPC. I know it's not a listed property, but it is a property that has come up for discussion many times as potential for listing. And, if we're asking people to weigh in on historic properties, that would seem to be the commission to do it. I have my own feelings about this. I'm somewhat torn on it because technically the front facade of this building is the main facade, and therefore the changes that are made to the front are more significant. But because of the way the depot was originally used, the back platform is arguably just as important as the front. And if we still had passenger trains coming past here, there would be a different story, obviously. And if the changes that were being proposed were not reversible changes, I would feel differently about them. But we're being assured that these are reversible in the future.
I'm not assuring you of that.
That's what it said in the report.
I'm saying they're not permanently changing any of the openings or creating a new opening in the wall. I mean, I think your description of the depot is spot on, that it's a two-sided building. You can't just say it's the back and it doesn't matter. That's not true when you're evaluating a depot structure, because the public interaction was both the arrival and probably more so about the platform in the back.
Not anymore, though.
No.
That's one reason why it's not listed, is because of the changes to the platform and the loss of the platform on the other side of the tracks. Some of those original elements of the historic integrity aren't there.
Right.
So you can't, in this case, it's appropriate to think of this as a two-sided building and not just the front that faces Main Street.
Was there a discussion about the impact to the site when that cooler was originally added?
Not that I know of. So I can't actually tell you when that cooler was placed or not. If it was part of the deli that was there or it happened at some other point in the past.
Further discussion? Is anybody in the audience? I'll open up public input. Is there anyone in the audience that wants to address council on this topic? Seeing none, close public input. All right, council.
Move alternative one.
Second.
All right. You want to describe what that is, Tim?
City Council can find the proposed changes to the depot building site have no negative impact on the historic qualities of the depot building.
Discussion? All right, roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Abstain.
Okay. Item 23 has been pulled at the request of the developer, so move to 24, proposed.
Sorry, I was just celebrating. One fewer item.
Oh, what did I miss here? I'm sorry. Am I the butt of the joke? All right.
No.
Definitely
All right.
not.
Proposed text amendments for updating non-conforming use and non-conforming structure standards. Council, do you have any questions for staff or do you want Kelly to go over anything?
No, look good.
No, I'm good.
I have one question, and that has to do with section 2, clause 6 in the revised or the recommended revisions. So it's right above the number 3 non-conforming structures remodeling.
Calculation of abandonment.
My concern actually is, what does it mean when we say without any contributing cause by the owner of the non-conforming use?
The obvious one would be arson.
I got that, but I'm thinking
What else
how broad
would be
is this
arson?
definition? I mean, are we talking about demolition by neglect? Are we talking about
No, we're not.
an owner who has missed property tax payments for a very long time? What constitutes a contributing cause?
I don't think it reaches that far at all. I think it's about a natural disaster or fire. It's really it's government action, a fire, or a natural disaster. So I don't think anything where your building is neglected is related to this issue at all.
It's not related to abandonment?
It is, but it's not in, this is to the benefit of the property. We're not going to hold, we're not going to start the clock against you being able to reestablish the use if these 3 things, any of these 3 things have happened. If you've chosen to neglect your building for a long period of time, that's going to count against you.
Yeah,
If you're not occupying that building and letting it fall apart, that is abandoned. That's covered under the 12-month period that's already the basis of the ordinance.
I see.
Okay.
This is a benefit to the property that the city will not start the 12-month clock because of something that was out of your control. And this is about the use only. It's not about the structure, even though they're intertwined if it burned down or it was destroyed.
Anything else? Is there anybody in the audience that open up public input? Is anyone in the audience that wants to address council on this topic? Seeing none, we'll close public input. Council? Is there any motion on this?
I'll move alternative 1.
Second?
All right. Which is to finalize text amendments.
For nonconforming uses, discontinuance of a nonconforming use and defining remodeling of a nonconforming structure, and publish public hearing notices for consideration of an ordinance by the city council.
All right. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. All right. Item 25, public hearings. Hi, Julie.
The request tonight before you right now is an integrated site plan, which includes concurrent approval of a preliminary plat and a major site development plan. This is at 1405, 1404, and 1410 Buckeye Avenue. 1405 is the old Kmart site in the parking area, and then 1404 and 1410 are existing lots on Duff, between Duff and Buckeye. The integrated site plan process essentially lets you, gives you some relief in some of the zoning requirements. So the parking and access will be, and landscaping will be shared across the site rather than on an individual lot basis. As far as the preliminary plat goes, the black bold lines are the lot lines were proposed for the preliminary plat. The staff report explains that these are pretty unique, a lot line arrangement, but it was primarily done because of to meet the FAR requirements and HOC and signage. And again, because we're doing an integrated site plan, you can get a little more creative with the lot lines than you would with just a standard plat. The only new public utilities that will be added is a somewhat short line from Buckeye into the site. Other than that, a traffic study was completed. There's no improvements required at this time, only because there may be a median added on South 16th. So so no improvements to Buckeye would be needed because that median would block those turn lanes. Stormwater management plan has been reviewed and is acceptable. As far as the site plan itself goes, the landscaping, they pretty much meet all the requirements. Kmart's going to be demised into 4 retail bays that face to the east. So there'll be 4 new retail storefronts. The back side of the building, which was the automotive portion of the building. The applicant is on the agenda tomorrow night at ZBA for approval for a interior climate controlled storage facility of up to 800 units. And then they'll be adding 5 new retail buildings in those commercial buildings, and there'll be a mix of fast food, sit down, and retail. At this time, no tenants have been confirmed. So we can't really speak specifically to what will be where exactly. Parking, they're able to meet the parking needs if the storage is approved. If not, they will be 66 stalls short. So we've added a condition that they'll have to take that into account as they demise their spaces and lease out, because restaurants, sit down, and fast food have a pretty high parking ratio requirement. Other conditions of approval all pretty much relate to site and use issues on the site. That building D has shows a fast food use there, drive-through use there, where one of the conditions is that the pickup window be on the east side, just to prevent stacking in the drive aisles and the park and blocking parking. With that, we've addressed some landscaping. Pretty much the landscaping meets the requirements except for South 16th Street. And it's really by approving the plan as shown, it's an alternative plan only in that they're not providing the amount of overstories as required. They're not able to meet the spacing, planting requirements for overstory trees. But they do have the total number of trees that are required. So it's just a small deviation from the landscaping requirements. Other than that.
We just want to point out, this is the first time this option of an integrated site plan has actually been proposed. So we're working through this with the applicant about the plat process and how you get to final plat so you can continue forward with development of the property. So the mix of it being a pre-existing site with nonconformities, balancing that out with where new changes and new construction are, it's kind of a complicated site plan for both the applicant and staff to go through. It's important to think about that as, yes, we're carving up into a lot of smaller lots, which doesn't help long-term for redevelopment, but this whole thing's to be tied together with a substantial number of operating agreements. And we'll have to review those and make sure that everybody's involved at final plant on how shared parking works and how everything is maintained as well. So the uses are the big part to justify the combination of everything. You do have to understand the uses are restricted as proposed, and the conditions are meant to clarify that we are accepting what the applicant has proposed. They can't swap in other things that aren't on that list. even though HOC allows for more uses, they are going to be limited to what's described in here without coming back to council, with the exception of the mini storage, which is allowable if the ZBA approves it tomorrow night.
And ZBA, the special use permit will take into account some design requirements of that use. There is residential to the west of the site. The screening is already in place, so one of the requirements is to maintain that as it's required by the zoning code anyway. So as far as like lighting and things like that, that will be taken into account with the special use permit tomorrow night.
And one of the just if you did not know that, we're recommending approval of the mini storage tomorrow. One of the key factors is that there's a condition in the special use permit, which ZBA would have to accept, that they actually construct building B and replace that square footage that would be devoted to mini storage with new retail. So they can't come in, carve up the mini storage first, and then not deliver the retail, which was the main reason that the city is interested in approving this project. So that's our recommended condition to the ZBA. So if they take our recommendation, then we are seeing a true shopping center get completed and built, and there wouldn't be a loss of commercial space, even if the mini storage goes forward.
Kelly, I love this project. It's been sitting there so stagnant for a long time. The community is so excited, I think, to see this change. One technical question. It seems like this would be there would be been a trigger for some kind of surface water issue. I don't see a ginormous lake here like we have in some of our other properties. Where's the lake?
It's under the new parking lot. So one reason why it took a little longer than we thought it would be to get to you was the applicant was constantly evolving their design. And I think there's someone here that could speak to it, but essentially where they're doing new construction, they're doing underground stormwater detention. That open space that's out there now on the east side of the parking lot was part of a stormwater facility. It wasn't really a pond or detention facility, but that's all being replaced with underground systems.
Very good. Thank you.
Perfect.
No lake.
No lake. One project had a lake. It went away quickly.
Kelly, can you comment on, you said that there, or Julie, that, can you go back to that subdividing that into like 1,500 lots or something like that? Or?
I believe it's 9, 7 on the Kmart side.
I mean, so I understand the integrated site plan. Does this allow them to sell off individual pieces? And so talk to the council about what's the implications in terms of when they sell it, what would the impact be on parking or, change of use or all the other things that go along with it? Because all of a sudden you got all these different parts and pieces. It's one right now, but then it's going to become subdivided into a bunch of different pieces, right?
Correct. So that is what you're here to approve, is that they can carve this up and have no respect for individual lots meeting any standards of the city. It's just going to be collectively operated. And then that's where, when we get to final plats, they'll have to satisfy city staff that they have the right agreements in place to maintain all of the property collectively. And it's going to be through reciprocal easements and operating standards.
So how does that work?
The north side kind of operates that way already today.
Okay.
I mean, they all have reciprocal access and maintenance agreements amongst each other to share parking and things like that. So the same thing would happen here.
When you say how does it work, I guess I need to understand a little more.
Well, it's like a homeowners association where you all have to, it's just.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. So they don't call it an HOA, but so this property is right now subject to this type of reciprocal easement with the Staples property and with the Jethro's property. So they have obligations to contribute to maintenance. How they're going to apportion that out, I don't know right now. They'll have to show us those documents to get final plat, but that'll all have to be detailed out and how the final plat's done about who contributes to what and how it's done.
Other questions for Kelly? We'll give you a chance in a second to speak. Can you talk about, I heard phasing all of a sudden. Is this not all going to go at one time?
So we don't have a phasing plan that says in any particular order. The only direction on how this is to proceed is that the mini storage can't be done until that building B is completed as at least a shell building. Okay. So if they don't build everything else out, how does that impact the integrated site plan analysis? So as a preliminary plat, They could come in and final plat individual lots as additions, just like in a residential subdivision. So you could plat lots 1 through 3 and then make lot 6 and 7 an outlot still if they weren't ready to build building B and do all that. So they would have to demonstrate at the time of final plat that the proper amount of parking exists to serve the lots that are going to have buildings on them. So they can't put all the parking on an outlot and not ever build that and be underparked or not meet the stormwater requirements. So things like stormwater would have to be done up front to cover any of the improvements that are going to be built in the future. So if this is not done all at one time, again, final plat will be the key time for us to know that, because you wouldn't be platting the lots. You would be represented as outlots at that point.
So that addresses my questions, and that is, that would preclude them from going in on the lots that are east of Buckeye, putting parking over there and not having buildings over there, or just having it it would have to remain a green space until it was actually developed into building and parking.
Correct. So they could build the parking lot that's on the site plan and not build the building, but they couldn't take the building out and just make it all parking without amending the plan.
So they could, one of your plans shows a parking, they could build that parking and just have a partial parking lot there?
So typically we don't, so if they wanted to come in and build this parking area and not build E and F and leave that as pads to be built in the future, they could do that. Typically in our way of doing site plans is that if you want to implement a component of it, you can do that if you meet all standards of that component you're doing at that time. What I was saying is you can't replace building E and F with just more parking and have no square footage.
Yeah. And it wouldn't make any sense, I don't think, developmentally to put the parking lot in, then come in later and do.
They could certainly build building E and building F, those two lots, before anything else happens. So if they final plat and those two lots are the first two lots 1 and 2 of the first edition, and the rest is an outlot, they could do that. So you could see different pieces being built before the bigger ones.
Kelly, could you put the plat map with the heavier lines back up there? So what is the logic at work here?
That's what
What's the there's not logic, it's called zoning and sign code.
it's called, sign code.
This is mostly driven by the sign code, because our sign code allows square footage by street frontage. So when you have really deep lots with big buildings, they had to try to find ways to generate enough street frontage to generate signage. If the sign code was based on building facades, you wouldn't have seen this. This might change. They could address possibly signage collectively as part of the final plat process, and maybe not have to have such gerrymandered lot lines, but it technically meets the zoning ordinance lotting requirements. It's really driven by signage standards.
HOC does have an FAR requirement. So lot 1, where the storage use would go if approved, got a little creative in order to meet the FAR requirement for that use specifically.
Good question, Gloria.
Other questions? I have one more. Would you please put up the exterior elevations?
Any building in particular?
Let's just, is that building B, the one that's along Buckeye?
The back or the front?
Back. The east elevation. So it's mentioned in the staff report and council.
So
I think this is
it's too big for the Elmo, so I'm just going to say this is the front.
That's so the
can
one with all the different facades is actually the west elevation.
So that's the view from the parking lot as you're parked in the parking lot.
So the storefront will face the new Kmart storefront.
Right. So you mentioned in your staff report, and I appreciate you bringing that, council's attention but along Buckeye, the bottom elevations, all we're going to see is walk doors, and that's it.
And really that's true. The elevation we brought to your attention was the 16th Street.
Well, and then go to 16th Street
Yeah,
next.
so-
And then we also got South Duff as well, too.
As well.
So I'm going to try to show you on this graphic a little bit why we were less concerned about Buckeye. So this drawing is trying to show you the pattern of the building outline as well. So while that reads flat, really there's a lot of modulation in the rear because of the loading.
I would argue there's actually more you're going to see because those walls go back and keep going around versus just seeing it straight and plain as well too. So, but anyway,
right. So then on 16th Street, which is building C.
C and D. Yeah.
Again, it's tough. So here's the top is the parking lot view. So that's facing north. And then this bottom elevation is what is along 16th Street.
And how long is that?
Here, it's on this one.
220 feet.
So, Council, by way of reference, as you know, up at North Grand Mall, along 24th Street, we have the U.S. Cellular and the AT&T, and it's probably less than half, maybe a third of that length. And you see what it's like, and then that's going to be along 16th, which is going to have more traffic with South Grand. It's kind of also going to be seen from people coming up on 69, Hunziker's building, and you're going to see that. And then you go to South Duff is the other thing you brought up too.
You made reference to some change or requirements for aesthetics. What were you alluding to?
Well, we said that so right now there isn't really any architectural treatments of substance on the rear facade. There'll be some landscaping, but it's not going to really cover or hide that. The example from 24th Street at the mall is a good example where there's a decent landscape buffer, but even after 6 years, it still takes a long time to grow in. So if there was a concern about the aesthetics, there are just different architectural enhancements that could be done to create relief by either changing the parapet heights and styles, adding trellises or arbors, things that just create texture to the building and provide more visual interest combined with landscaping. You don't have to necessarily break the building up or change the square footage. There are just other things that could be added to it, which are fairly common in larger shopping centers and when they're in high visibility areas.
And we'll let the applicant talk here in a minute, but I'm assuming that most of these have rooftop units.
Yes.
So you're probably going to see also there's no screening.
So we have so one of the conditions, because when we see these types of plans, they don't know tenants, they don't know the roof units yet. So it's really tough for staff to get the screening planned up front. We do try to say that we want the units collectively located so the screening can be around the units collectively rather than around each unit individually. They could also possibly increase some of the parapet height to start with to maybe meet our standard right away without having to screen individual units. But at this point, we don't have a real roof plan with mechanical equipment.
Understand. And then South Duff.
Yeah, it's in the that one. E and F.
That one?
E and F. Yep. That one.
These are broken apart though.
Yeah. So it's just E, and then F is a separate building on the next page.
There's actually two buildings there, right?
Well, it's one building, but they're going to look similar. Yeah.
So where's South Duff?
So this would be the
East elevation.
east elevation. And then I have another page for the other half of the building.
And the one to the left, is that I think the buildings face each other. There's a space in between. Was that
Again, they both face towards a Kmart store. They face towards a parking lot.
blank wall?
Yeah.
So this is South Duff on this.
So in the lower right hand. Yeah.
The east elevations.
Yeah. One of them, building E, is labeled as a restaurant. It could be fast. It shows a potential for possibility for a drive-through. So,
My questions sound like I'm picking this apart. I think I agree with Tim. This is an outstanding, exciting redevelopment. It's just this is the opportunity we have to really talk and dialogue with the applicant, and it just seems like this is really a key on key connectors. Duff.
mm-hmm.
And Hunziker and the law firm have done outstanding job. So has Vision Bank in terms of respecting Duff, even though they face west. Respect Duff, And I just think that's something we could talk about with the applicant about what can we do to try and complement that. And the same thing on Buckeye as well as on South 16th. Staff brought it up, and so as council deliberates on this, I
How
think
much control do we have? I think John raises some really good points. I had a similar concern with the redevelopment of the Walmart project. I didn't like the way they had oriented it, but the staff explained to me that we didn't really have the ability to control how Walmart oriented its building. I would have liked to have done it differently. But Kelly,
well, I can share that we did talk to Fairway, and they did modifications to their east, they're right next to Burnett, and they have put in lighting. They put in some, you won't know the difference, but it's gonna be dark glass and window framing to try and break out that elevation. And they identify what those costs are going to be, and they said, yeah, they understood that. And so basically, it was some trying to maneuver so people are walking by it or driving by it aren't basically driving by something which is basically. I mean, I understand you have to have a back of a building. That's just part of that's part of life. But to your point, you can ask. Sorry, Kelly, I jumped in. But
well, I mean, in a situation where we're providing some kind of incentives, then as a city, we have a little more ability to make requests for architectural changes. But Kelly, do we have any leverage here other than just saying, hey, could you please make some improvements?
So one that we don't have is real specific. We don't have specific design guidance for commercial buildings. So we have very basic site plan approval standards about building mass. So architectural treatments relate to addressing the size of buildings and how they're compatible with the surroundings. So it's as broad as we can be, but they are asking for a major site plan and an integrated site plan. So they're asking to not meet all the standards on each lot, but so they're asking for a little bit of dispensation about thinking of it as a shopping center, which brings kind of more of the conversation about the reason you're seeing this is we wanted a collective shopping center design and look. It wanted to look like a shopping center instead of a lot of carved up individual buildings. So the things we're talking about are fairly minor in the range of things you could be talking about if you had commercial design guidelines. We're not asking. I mean, I don't know if we've asked for anything yet, but we're not asking for high levels of changes or suggesting high levels of changes are needed to make this somewhat more compatible with these other businesses that exist along South Duff.
No, these are
we're not asking for, we're not asking for 100% brick or any of these more substantial standards that you could have, but we don't have those. So that's been considered kind of off the table.
I think we did point it out in the staff report just because it is so much back of the building along public right of way. I mean, in a different scenario, it's not much different. It wouldn't be any different than you would see anywhere else. It's just staff just wanted to point that out to council and the commission.
The references that John made again are the office buildings on Buckeye and Duff are the ones that have a higher degree of standards to them. Than some of the other stuff to the south, which was, much older buildings.
But the question is, if you're going with this unusual approval process, does it now open the door to ask something?
It opens the door, the same door as any other request about just kind of addressing general massing characteristics of a building. It doesn't require you to say, I want 80% brick and I want this, this, and this. That's not the standards the city has for the zoning district, but it does let you deal with some of these details where they are related to the size and location and appearance. Really not the appearance, the visibility of the building would be a better way to think of that.
The traffic and we're shredding the applicant before they had a chance even to talk. But the point is, it also presumes that he's also interested in a very attractive project as well too. It's just I'd rather bring the issues up now and then let him talk about them all at one time. So go ahead.
The traffic on South 16th is only going to go up because we're going to be punching Grand through there. So I think your point's really well taken.
And we have it's a main conduit to Jack Trice Stadium.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot. So anyway, with that introduction,
welcome to Ames.
Good evening, good night, however you want me to put it.
So go ahead and
sticking around.
Introduce yourself, and we invite you to share your thoughts and respond to questions.
Chad Williams with Net Lease Alliance. I'm affiliated with On Point Development LLC, which is the applicant. Address is 127 Crooked Creek Lane, Hendersonville, Tennessee. Anyway, it's an exciting project. What we are finding is these dark Kmarts. There's big opportunities for it. We're doing one down in Dalton, Georgia right now where we went in and re-tenanted it. And that's supposed to be done by the end of the year. It's going to turn out to be a great project. So these are going to come on board, not just in Ames, but a lot of places. And it brings great opportunity for tenants that aren't here to be here anywhere across the United States. And we're finding a lot of tenant interest to be here with the center that we're creating, with the synergy we have going and things like that. So with that, I mean, we kind of went through everything. I can answer questions. Mr. Garton, are you okay with the not having a pond out front? I can go into detail if you want me to.
It was
That we're
actually in the
handling that.
staff report. I overlooked that paragraph.
Okay.
So, but thanks
Okay.
though.
And as far as building architecture, I'm willing, we're willing to do something to dress up the backside of the buildings. I would be really, if that's what we want to do, if you would just let us work it out with staff through an approval tonight, to not hold me up so that I can go to BZA tomorrow night. We are on a contract deadline to close on this property. And the sooner the better I get approvals, the better things fall in line with banks and financing and equity and all of that stuff. That's just the fact of the matter.
What is your schedule?
Closing is December 21st, right before Christmas. And, we can get our architect, Slaggy, out of Omaha to go back and forth with Julie and staff just to come up with something that's amenable. Whether it's pilasters or brick accents or the black glass spandrel glazing, which I'm not a fan of because it stays black all the time. And, it's, after 10 years, it can look terrible from weather and things like that. We're willing to do something. Parapets along the back. We are going to have rooftop units. I understand that those do have to be screened, and that's things we'll have to play with as well. Once those RTUs are defined, rooftop units, then we can really kind of hone in on where those parapets need to pop up and stuff.
Understood.
But, now that it might be conceptual and tied to the final building permit issuance or something like that with staff, planning approval. So,
I kind of see this as an opportunity for you to set a standard and show what can be done in these kind of developments that respects all four sides of a building. So that's kind of one thing that, I just would encourage, think it through because,
I agree. Yeah.
because it's really, we want to, our vision, I think, for the community is really to continue to enhance it. And this is going to be spectacular on the inside. It's just it's the outside that I would say most people are going to experience your development from the outside, not from the inside. You'd probably like it the other way around, but it's just a fact of life.
Well, we want to get them there to see the front side of it.
But it's the traffic, and it's just we just don't. I just don't think that the vision is to have everything just be focused interior. I actually talked to Todd a few months ago and challenged him to think about actually reversing it. So some of the front doors actually faced Buckeye and faced 16th and try to arrange it that way.
And that's tough from a tenant perspective as well. They have certain requirements too.
You're not going to, you present
But we
it.
will, yeah. We'll definitely work with you guys. We want it to be we obviously want it to be a good project. So, was there anything else that was brought up? I don't. And I'll address real quick, the subdivision, how we're carving it up. That's really kind of common practice in shopping centers across the United States. It's governed by an REA, reciprocal easements and agreements document, an REA, and it has in there cross parking. It gets recorded at the county level. Usually it's called out on the plat book page number. That's a governed document. And if you want to change it, it's very hard to change because you have everybody that's part of that to have to sign off on that document. So it's really kind of a lasting document forever and ever. But that will be submitted to you guys. You guys review it, sign off on it.
Right. So with final plat,
Yeah.
that next step, we will see those kinds of documents. Yes, it does have to be recorded. It's very common and they're almost impossible. They're almost impossible to change once they're done because everybody has asked for something. So it's get it right when you set it up, or it's going to be the way forever.
And it has everything in there from snow plowing Everybody contributes to snow. I mean, it's got everything in there, more than you want to know.
I was trying to avoid was all of a sudden city being in a situation in 5 or 10 years when all of a sudden you got different pieces trying to be remodeled or site changes being made, and all of a sudden they're actually separate entities and causing grief for staff or future councils to try and deal with it. That's all.
So they'll have, which is interesting because we're at a major site plan. So these are conceptual elevations, some flexibilities inherent in the level of detail we have. Individual tenant packages will come in and can be slightly different. If it was substantially different, it may be a revision to this permit, but it also would, these REAs would typically require sign off from all the major tenants that they're not doing something that would undermine the interest of the major tenants. Now, when the major tenant wants to make the change, I'm not sure how that goes necessarily, but little flexibility at the city, and then they're going to have to govern themselves a lot.
Chad, could you comment on the phasing? I mean,
You did bring that up. I mean, typically we're going to put the whole parking lot in the way it shows on the site plan, 99% of the time. And I do have a question to ask staff about the recommendation tomorrow night, but we could come in and say building C, we could just make that, go ahead and just pad ready that building.
I'm sorry, which building you point out?
But I'm just building C maybe, and building D.
Bottom middle.
Building C,
Yeah.
South 16th. Building D is this one on the corner.
We could just do all the earthwork and infrastructure and pad ready those sites, but all the parking lot and infrastructure's in because we have to get the new underground detention in. And all, I mean, it's a ripple effect. So we have to do all the site improvements basically. And then if we did come back and do building C as a phasing, the pad's ready to go, utilities are there, we submit for building permits, and then we pull our building permits, can go vertical. So that's kind of the way that I see it. I mean, ideally, we'd like to do it all at once, but the reality is building C may or may not come later, just the way it is. And can I ask you a question about the recommendation tomorrow night, or is that off topic?
Not
We can talk about it
It'll be
After, okay, yeah. Did that answer your question, Mayor? Okay.
Okay, council. Thank you.
So I think if you wanted to take the applicant's offer to work with staff further, you would add another condition. What we have in here doesn't directly ask for more. So we do have some details in here that are really deferred to staff, and we would be comfortable working with the level of detail that we've discussed with them if that's in your interest to make that a condition.
Do we need public input on this?
Yes, we do. Thank you. Is there anyone that like to address council on this item?
Drew? Nothing to say? Trent? No?
Thumbs up.
It's time to ask.
Yeah.
All right, we'll close public input.
I move alternative one, but modify it to direct staff to work with the developer with respect to the exterior improvements that we discussed tonight.
Second.
I give you enough.
So I think
No, it's not improvements you discussed. What are you trying to accomplish to what? Let's be.
Kelly said he was comfortable if
I
we.
think for us, building C and D are easier to deal with. I'm not sure how much, other than maybe some minor changes to the larger B, will be done because of the loading dock situation. But I guess if you want to be more specific about areas, if it's South Duff, South 16th, and Buckeye, I guess that would be the only question I'd really have.
I'll withdraw my motion. Let's
Excuse me.
It's just different for building B. They have operational considerations with the driveways, so we can't really put
We think you should make
projections
this
from the
motion.
building
We
in
think
those areas.
There's improvements to be made here.
But I don't know what to say.
Kelly, what should they say?
Yeah, I mean,
I think what I heard was that we'd like the applicant to work with staff to add architectural features to the buildings along the public streets that provide more interest and variation in the design.
Okay, so I'll move alternative.
So I'm sorry.
he withdrew his.
I can do, yeah, I can do 1A with all the sub
A1
ones,
through 9.
1B, and then add 1C, which would be what Kelly just talked about. Is that what you're saying?
I thought it was condition
alternative one.
10.
It's a condition, yeah.
Under A.
Pardon me?
Yeah.
Isn't it adding a condition 10 under A?
Sounds
Yeah.
right.
I'm losing. Is that-
Yeah, I
We
agree
need
with
to,
Gloria.
yeah,
Gotcha.
it needs to go under the conditions of the site plan.
Thank you.
Right.
Get that, Amy?
So,
Well, maybe
Right.
I can try.
go ahead.
All right.
Where are they?
No?
Go ahead.
Okay, well, I'll start this way. I would move approval of alternative 1A with an additional condition that the applicant work with staff to add architectural features to buildings along public streets that add variation and interest to design.
Second.
Good job.
But don't you also want to do 1B?
We also need
yes.
one.
That's
Yes, so we need A and B for the project to
Yeah.
proceed.
Yep.
And I would add B to that. Is there another second?
That's a second.
okay. So it's motion
Makes sense.
on the agenda, 2 resolutions approving. So are you going to, is 1A actually the resolution approving a major site development plan?
It is contingent on getting final plat. I mean, that's what the code requires. So yes, there's a resolution for A and a resolution for B.
So, and then 1B is the preliminary plat, which is actually alternative 1B.
We need them both, though, right?
No, it's alternative 1, A and B.
Yeah.
It's not alternative 1B.
Right.
It's alternative 1 is A plus B.
Right.
You can't do them separately. You have to have both.
That's why I asked David to modify his motion.
He did.
Yeah.
We've got the right motion on the floor.
Okay, well, it's carried on 2 separate items on the agenda. That's all. I was just found the agenda.
Oh,
Yeah, it's
Resolution approving major site development plan. Resolution approving preliminary plat of Southwood.
I see.
So I'm just trying to follow the agenda to make sure that we.
I mean, ultimately, you have to approve both for
Right.
either one to stand.
Right.
So whether it's 2 motions or 1, as long as they both pass, it doesn't matter.
Haven't we had one of these situations before where we had to split them up because they were both resolutions?
As you know.
Probably overly
Doesn't matter as long as it's just.
I think I'd better err on the side of caution and just do 1A and then 1B, anticipating that B is going to also pass.
So.
So do we have to restate it?
Yes.
we have
Okay.
to Withdraw the motion.
Withdraw the motion. Let's do it over again.
Withdraw the motion.
Okay.
And would move approval of alternative 1A with the additional condition that the applicant work with staff to add architectural features to buildings along public streets that add variation and interest to design.
Second.
A second. All right. Any other discussion? Roll call.
Aye.
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 Okay. Another motion.
Would move approval of alternative 1B.
Second.
Which is a preliminary plat for Southwood South Subdivision, 4th edition. Okay.
Correct.
Roll call. Aye.
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 All right. Thank you for coming and look forward to seeing it progress and working with staff, Chad. All right. Thank
Hey,
you.
Chad.
Thank you.
If you could send some of your weather up here, we'd really appreciate it too, if you would.
Oh.
How much was
Oh,
it?
never mind.
Really? Oh, you can keep it. All right, item 26. Hearing on development agreement with Barilla America, the tax increment rebate incentives and project development requirements. Any questions for staff?
Nope.
Not entertaining a is there any, can you open up? All right.
You got
There's
it.
no.
You got it.
Too fast here. Declare the public hearing on the development agreement with Barilla Incorporated, Barilla America Incorporated, with tax increment rebate incentives and project development requirements open. Is there anyone that wishes to address council? Seeing none, I close the public hearing. Entertain a motion on the resolution approving development agreement.
Move alternative 1.
Second.
Discussion?
I would like to say that we talk a lot about precedent, about forming precedent here, and this is something that was initiated before I joined council. And I think it's important to emphasize that future councils aren't bound by things that are initiated by other councils. So I went and I read the record on this and I watched the video. This most substantial discussion was February 28th. And without going into detail there, I think it laid out the situation very well, explained it well. And that's why I'm supporting this as well.
Okay, thank you, David. All right, roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Entertain a motion on resolution approving minimum assessment agreement.
Move approval.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Aye.
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 Thank you very much. All right. Item 27, hearing on scaffolding and related services and supply contract. I'll declare that public hearing open. Is there anyone who wishes to address council on this topic? Seeing none, close public hearing.
Move alternative one.
Second.
All right. Discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. All right, item 28, declare the hearing on 2018-19 sanitary sewer rehabilitation, Wilson and 15th Street, to be open. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this topic? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, entertain a motion on resolution of approving plans, specifications, and awarding contract to Synergy Contracting, LLC, in the amount of $2,663,751.50.
So moved.
Second.
All right, move second. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Ordinances. 29, second passage of ordinance related to development standards of the neighborhood commercial zoning district.
Move on second.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Item 30, second passage of ordinance to allow alternative landscape plan approval in conjunction with a special use permit.
Move on second.
Second. Discussion. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Item 31, third passage and adoption of ordinance number 4373 regarding exceptions to minimum stories and minimum floor area ratio for the downtown service center.
Move on third.
Second. Roll call. Aye.
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 Nay.
Aye.
All right. Disposition of communications to council. We have 3 items. Staff report, November 9th, 2018, regarding Hunziker's request for a refund on South Duff Signal Project.
Do we need to move to put this on a future agenda? Is that the best way to deal with this one? Or
Which one is this one?
Hunziker's
The refund.
rebate?
The refund.
The refund. Hunziker.
Number
South Duff.
If you like to put it on there
I'd move that we
to
put,
discuss it.
Or do we just
Do it.
approve
Well,
it?
and we could do it at that meeting too if we discussed it. I mean, we could follow through on our decision.
I prefer we discuss it.
okay.
That's fine.
I'd move that we put this on a future agenda.
But my point is that we could follow through on that future
At the
agenda item.
time.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Second.
Or who moved and who made a second?
I move to put it on a future
Second.
agenda.
Tim, second, okay. All right. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Number 2, staff report on the airport hangar proposal from Brian Ox.
We did get an email from Brian right before council start. Well, I think Diane showed us too. I don't know if you guys saw that, but I guess I would move that we delay on this topic to get the opportunity and direct staff, I guess, to get more feedback from Mr. Ox. Is that how you pronounce it? And then there was an airport steering committee? Is that right, that an airport
Yeah, there was.
committee that was established? I would also ask we get feedback from them.
About lowering the rates?
Yeah, or, you know, how our rates compare to other communities.
We
or
can get
just
you that data first. Should we get you the data?
Sure, I guess I just thought there was an airport steering committee that helped with the, you know, the hangar renovations, you know, all that, or I thought that was still in existence, this airport
Yeah, but
committee.
all this, the data would be based on what other cities are doing or something you just collect?
Well, that would be nice to have that from staff, but I guess I'm curious, I would also be curious what the committee's thoughts are.
Yeah, we've gotten feedback from 2 people so far, and
The
I don't
user group.
think anyone else is probably fully aware of maybe what's potentially going to be discussed. So
All right, so let's.
Oh, want me to
could you-
condense
Could you
it?
clarify the
Yeah.
motion for record?
Yeah. I would move that we direct staff to bring us more data on how others, you know, what other cities' parameters are for airport rental, hangar rental fees. That's part one. And reach out to the airport user committee, whatever we call that, to get their feedback on this topic.
Good.
Second.
Okay.
That's fine. I agree.
What do we have them for if we're not going to use them for getting input?
Okay, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. And then the third one is letter from Kurt Friedrich regarding request to establish, expand criteria, allow office uses to qualify for urban revitalization and tax increment abatement for improvements.
I would move that we communicate to Mr. Friedrich that we are not interested in this at this time.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
So
Sorry, office use, yeah, well, I guess we can't debate it, can we?
I don't want to necessarily debate, but is it permissible for Brahman to just explain the rationale for taking this position?
I'm not interested in expanding urban revitalization criteria to include office use.
It's basically asking that we add a tax abatement incentive
For office, for the
office
redevelopment
use,
of offices.
office use.
So this would just, your motion would kill, we just basically would say, we're not interested, period,
Yeah, I would communicate disinterest, yep.
right? All right, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
3-3.
What's it?
Right?
A motion to change our.
it's not a
It'll have to come back as a resolution. We'll need a resolution to.
What's that?
Barbie? Just want to make sure you're not approving it. It'll have to come back perhaps.
I mean, this is a motion to direct staff to do or not do something. Ultimately, you need to adopt an ordinance and a resolution to enact the request.
Which will take 4 votes.
right.
Okay, so I'm not going to vote on this because it's going to ultimately go into a resolution and ordinance, which I can't vote on. So right now, the motion to not proceed it with it died. Is there a motion to the contrary?
I'm sure I understand.
That
So
would seem pointless.
Right. I'm sorry, I'm getting tired. What? Died. Sorry, I'm kind of. So where do we go with this? I need help.
What?
It's just dead?
It's just dead.
It's just dead, and we're not telling him it's dead, apparently.
Yeah.
No, we informed them what the vote was.
I know.
yeah,
So,
Yeah.
communicate
that's fine.
that.
So,
The outcome
Right.
of the vote, yeah.
Obviously.
but it also didn't.
Get enough votes to one.
Yep. Tight.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
just trying to tell him.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's just teasing.
All right. Council comments. Allie, let's start with you tonight.
Sure. I'm really excited to finally have the joint meeting tomorrow. So, yeah, I don't know what else to say except I'm excited to see everyone and have it be a working meeting and to use the most out of the hour that we have. And
we start at 6.
starts at 6, Campanile Room, Memorial Union.
Okay. There may be a few council members that thought it was actually going to be at 7. So
Now we
they are not intentionally skipping it. It
Yes.
just happens to be that there was some misinformation. So
Mhm.
we'll share it tomorrow night too. Is that's not that council
Yes.
isn't interested in what's going on. It just happened to be some
Yeah.
didn't know about it, and so it won't be there.
Mhm.
I think a majority will be there, but some may not.
Sure. Yeah, that's
And Campanile Room.
Campanile Room.
All right, we're good. Anything else,
None for me. I'm just excited for break.
Gloria?
Nothing for me.
Nothing tonight.
I'm a council appointee to the Ames Convention and Visitors Bureau, so I just wanted to give you a brief update from there. I've been working on the Community Grants Committee. The Community Grants Committee is awarding about $90,000 this year. There were over 30 applications. Final decisions haven't been announced yet, but I did want to mention that $90,000 that's being granted comes from the hotel motel tax collected. It amounts to about 3.5% of the tax that's collected. So it's sent into the grant program and then divvied out for interesting events throughout the town. That's my update. No other news for me.
Roman?
I don't think I have anything tonight.
So, as I mentioned earlier in the meeting, I would like to move that we direct staff to come back with a report about the fiscal impacts of reducing the parking meter rates to 50 cents per hour. And that's number one. And number two, to offer suggestions as to sources of alternative funding for the needed capital improvements.
I'll second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
No.
Carried 4-2.
Nothing further.
Amber, anything?
Nothing.
I think just 2 quick comments. One is really enjoyed the National League of Cities. I think we got a lot of good work sessions, some things to work on and to delve into.
Why does everybody keep rubbing that in?
I'm sorry.
It was so warm too. It was really warm.
Yeah.
Oh.
And secondly, we had an election last Tuesday, and so just wanted to say that we welcome Linda Merkin to the County Board of Supervisors, and Mr. Sanders stays on it. And just in the spirit of wanting to really continue to work together, open door, and she's already reached out and wants to meet as well too. So I think that our goal is to continue that collaboration and working together with Story County and with all the other cities as well too. So
Commend the voters. It was a very high turnout.
Great turnout.
For this midterm. So it speaks well of the civic engagement of our community.
All right.
I'm sorry, Mayor. I forgot one thing. Will you let me
Certainly.
bring up another topic? Sorry, everyone. But this has to do with the fact that we've done a couple of tax abatement discussions this year. We're going into budget season, and we had a motion earlier this year in a memo regarding increased transparency for tax abatement discussions. So I think it's a good time for us to take that up. I would move that we put that memo and on the agenda for the November 27th meeting. We discuss the alternatives offered there.
I'll second.
Those in favor say aye.
Could you clarify? I'm not sure I remember what this is. What's the memo?
The memo was requested and delivered in March, and it has to do with the ways that council could make the process more transparent to the public when it relates to people asking for tax incentives from the city of Ames.
Especially greater than typical tax incentives too, if I remember right.
Yeah.
And And so I want to just be careful. Steve, is this something, but from a timing perspective, we have a Thanksgiving break coming up. Is this something that's reasonable for your staff?
I already wrote the memo.
You should bring it back on, it's taken.
I gave it to the council many, what is it, March? I forgot.
I think so. I think it was March.
But is the November 27th meeting?
Big.
Yeah.
Don't know. I'll know Thursday.
Would it be more helpful to have the motion not with a date specific, but
I would prefer it didn't have a date specific.
What's the value, David, for having it on that particular date?
Getting it before the budget process and before we go through this again. We've got, like I said, we've had a couple of requests for incentives and abatements, and I think we just overlooked it, and I think
the budget process is a long one. I mean, there are a number of different regular meetings that we could put this in January. Is there something? I'm just trying to understand the benefit for the conversation.
the benefit is just by being specific, we actually will do it on a date rather than letting it, forget about it again.
Could we, another option, could you say no later than?
No later than, what's your suggestion? Yeah, I can say that.
In middle of December or
The end of
whatever.
the year.
Okay. I would
Just that way, it gives staff a little bit of flexibility.
No,
They get a
that's
really
fair.
heavy agenda.
Okay, withdraw and revise this to ask for that memo to be put to be the basis for an agenda item no later than the end of the year.
Second.
Okay. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
All right. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
We are adjourned.